The story began with a sudden and unexpected quarrel. The leader of the hero squad, Nardo, announced the immediate exile of our heroine Eris Falres. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, Harris could not believe it was some kind of prank. But Nardo's visible anger did not hint at any trickery. He wanted Oris to disappear from his sight right now. Passers-by at the scene, watching the fierce altercation, stood in amazement and wondered what could have happened. However, they wisely kept their distance, not wanting to get involved in the conflict, and quickly disappeared before things escalated. Nardo admitted that the enhancement magic from Eris was indeed useful, but shrugged indifferently. Eris is just a potion that is easy to replace. Moreover, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, he claimed that the party did not need such a burden at all. Nardo even shouted that Eris was stealing experience points and grabbing them for herself. In this world, defeating monsters granted experience points that made one stronger, and these points were shared equally among party members. Eris understood their motive. They expelled him simply because they wanted more experience for themselves. When Eris tried to explain, Nardo completely ignored his words. The dismissal was already decided, and he sharply ordered him to leave. Other members also kept their distance, as if he just read the mood in the room and stepped back. Before his final departure, Oris asked one last time if they were really satisfied with him leaving the hero party. But they almost called him annoying, saying that they would finally be free from such dead weight as him. Did Eris step back and move on? He thought that this did not need to be explained. It was clear that the group relied on his magic, but they still pushed him aside, not understanding. Harris believed that usually they would eventually come back and bring him back, all worried like that, but now he was resolute he would not go back. Harris joined the band of heroes to take revenge on the demon lord who took his family from him, and to prevent new disasters, but now, outside the band, his primary task was to put his own life in order. Thinking about his future, he firmly decided to obtain an adventurer's license. Soon he reached the guild house and approached the reception, who kindly offered her help. When Eris boldly declared that he wanted to become an adventurer, she instantly glanced at the clock and informed him that he arrived just in time for the exam. Then asked how he wanted to proceed. He replied that, if possible, he wanted to take it immediately. She instantly handed him the registration form to fill out, and he quickly wrote his name and profession. He is an enchanter who strengthened his comrades with enhancement magic, a skill he was born with. Has she already scanned that completed form? She asked hesitantly if he was from the hero squad. Eris was surprised at how quickly she recognized him just by his name and profession. He understood perfectly. As soon as they found out about his exclusion from the hero party, problems would begin. Quickly orienting himself, Eris sharply waved it off. It is a common name, and he has no connection to the hero party. Then he slyly asked what would be on the exam to divert her attention. She explained that there would be 4 tests in total. Magical power trial, shooting at targets, a practical test, and a final test. She explained in detail that he needed to pass all 4. He was allowed an unlimited number of attempts and was wished good luck. She led him to the test location. At first, she led him to the room where his magical power was to be tested. For Oris, this was supposed to be the first time his magical power was measured since he joined the hero squad, although he was confident he would pass. Inside the room, on a pedestal, on a small stand, rested a polished crystal. She carefully placed her hand on it. She showed how the test worked. Touching the crystal would absorb the magic and show its power level. The brighter it shone, the more magical power it had, and when it dimmed, the power became weaker. The crystal subtly lit up from her touch. Oris asked about the passing score. She replied that for her level of magic it was difficult, but if it shone even a little brighter, it would be counted. Yes, she also added that even without being an adventurer, she could master a decent amount of magic, so for him it shouldn't be too difficult. Eris firmly placed her hand on the crystal and decided to try anyway. As soon as he touched the surface, it exploded with a dazzling glow. The light instantly blinded the receptionist, and Eris decided that this bright beam meant he passed the test. When he turned to ask the receptionist about his result, her legs gave way and she fell. He wondered if he had made a mistake. She quickly apologized for her unexpected reaction and sincerely admitted that she had never seen anything like it before. Gathering herself, she focused again on Eris's magic. And he continued pouring his power into the crystal. It began to heat up unbearably. He asked anxiously whether the crystal would withstand this strain or crack. But she assured him, "It is strong, I have never heard of such a thing." To their complete disbelief, the crystal began to noticeably crack, backwards and then instantly split into 2 parts. Seeing this, Eris began to puzzle over what it meant, and the receptionist fell to the floor again. Trembling, she whispered aloud. She wondered in surprise how this could have happened. Even S-level magic should have been reflected by the crystal, and she already began to suspect that Eris really was from the hero party. But he immediately dismissed her suspicion, saying, "It's obvious a mage from the hero squad wouldn't go looking for the fate of an adventurer." He reached out his hand to help her up, and most importantly immediately inquired about the test results. She gently reassured him, "You undoubtedly passed this test." He apologized for the trouble caused and admitted that with the broken crystal, further trials were currently impossible. But she noticed that it was unexpected, and the guild should have anticipated such a result in advance when she began examining the broken crystal. She accidentally scratched her hand and started bleeding. Iris immediately took her hand and remarked that it was quite a dramatic cut. He extended his hand and offered to heal her wound with his magic. The injury quickly closed, and she froze in amazement. Eris can heal, besides being a mage. It was usually believed that mages used enhancement spells only to attack or defend, and few guessed that it was actually about granting some property. Without hesitation, he asked if there were any problems if he, as a mage, used healing magic, and she hesitantly answered, no. Moreover, he offered to fix the crystal. She asked in astonishment if it was really possible, when he began pouring his healing magic into the cracked crystal. It noticeably began to restore and heal. Soon the crystal was like new, and seeing this amazing restoration, she sincerely thanked him. Oris obediently sighed and admitted that initially all this damage happened because of him. He asked again if the next test was a training shooting test, and she confirmed it. It was explained that he had to hit the target with magic or a sword, and his score would be determined by the strength of the attack. Standing before the place of the next trial, the receptionist confidently stated that with Eris's magic, the upcoming shooting would be a breeze, while Eris herself, as a master of enchantments, asked not to expect too much from her. He said it was just support, but deep in his heart, he believed he could still pass this test. Soon she led him to the testing site, where several straw targets lay in a row on the ground. She showed how it was done. She formed a magic sphere and struck the target with it, telling him that the target would glow depending on the strength of the attack. To pass, he had to exceed his current attack power, and of the 3 attempts, only the strongest counted. She even allowed him to choose for this test sword or magic. For a moment he thought he could enhance the sword with magic, but if he chose magic, he wouldn't need any tools at all. In any case, he said any method would do, but magic was more convenient for him, so he decided to use it, and the girl behind the counter, seeing how easily he considered both options, was surprised before agreeing. He chose Fireball, a simple beginner spell common in the arsenal of many support roles. The chances were limited, only 3, so he decided to cast the beginner spell on the first try. And on the second, keeping the plan in mind, he aimed to score high by using a magical spell. He formed an overly large fireball and hurled it toward the target. This began to show even a fireball has its limits, but as soon as he turned around, he was surprised to see the receptionist's face frozen in astonishment. She called his abilities insane and said she was momentarily blinded, while Eris calmly assured her that he hadn't even used his full power. As soon as the fog from the previous strike cleared, she was even more surprised to hear that he still wasn't using his full power. The receptionist stood stunned by the destruction. Not only was the target dummy destroyed, but the explosion also affected the neighboring dummies. Eris asked if the dummies were supposed to break, but waved it off. They were already clearly broken, so she considered this test passed as well. And regarding the last 2 shots, she said there was no need to continue. He had already easily passed the test. Moreover, she pointed to the damaged arena and noted that with such destruction, they couldn't even continue. Without saying a word, Oris activated his healing magic and instantly restored the devastated area, repairing all the dummies he had broken, and she immediately said that although they could now continue the exams, there was actually no need. Eventually, Eurus passed the shooting test with a single fireball. The next trial was a practical exam where he would have to go one-on-one against the examiner, a C-rank adventurer. Only those recognized as having passed this stage were allowed to the final exam. Novices usually rose to ranks D and C by completing guild orders and accumulating practical experience. Adventurers of rank C and above were generally considered established. So for the practical test, the risk had to earn the approval of the examiner, a true adventurer. When he stepped into the arena, he saw he was not the only candidate. Quite a few others had already gathered around, all here for the exam. Meanwhile, the receptionist said that it was rare for someone of Eris's caliber to pass all the exams in one day. And the examiner, named Chris, stood before the candidates and noticed that they looked significantly younger than him. He apologized because of their weight and said that he would be their opponent in the practical exam. He explained in detail that everyone had to choose their desired fighting style sword or magic. the duel would end when one side became unable to fight or surrendered, and the result of the duel would determine whether they passed the exam or failed. Then he confidently told them to approach him with a clear intention to win. Eris raised his hand and asked how exactly the points would be counted, since their success depended on the duel's outcome. Chris explained, the exam replicates real demands essentially. It is a test to see if the candidates have the necessary skills for the final exam. They would evaluate basic combat skills, crisis reaction, and overall ability to understand the situation. Hearing this, Eris thought that the evaluation criteria were too vague. Although it was not the answer he desired, he still decided to move forward. He also inquired whether he would pass if he managed to defeat Chris. Chris confidently snorted and declared that he would indeed pass if he proved he was capable. He also said that although victory would guarantee passing, he had never lost to any candidate who claimed that. Hearing this, Oris pondered. Even in a support role, he was part of the hero team, and although a tough fight awaited ahead, he was confident he would not lose. He felt a little calmer at the thought that victory would allow him to advance further. Then Chris called the first in line, inviting her to step forward and challenge him. The girl stepped forward, and Eris sighed with relief. They had avoided the first clash, and now had time to properly think through the plan. When the fight began, the girl energetically unleashed her magic, and Eris thought that for her age she had a bright future. While Chris was preparing, Eris noticed that he read the flow of her magic and skillfully redirected the attack. When Chris rushed at the candidate at full speed, the girl noticeably flinched. This made Eris wonder, did she foresee such a complete defeat? She was much more skillful than her peers, but her arrogance ruined her. Chris's sword instantly hovered over her neck, and she immediately surrendered. Chris appreciated her skill and said that the attack was powerful, but when she failed to make a preemptive strike, she was completely unprepared for what happened next. Chris said sadly that with such skills, she did not deserve to pass. He advised her to try again next time, but only after she seriously honed her skills. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she had no choice but to leave the hall. After her, it was Eris's turn. His time to compete had come. As soon as Chris reviewed the form, he jumped in surprise. A reinforcement mage had come to the exam. Eris himself knew well, reinforcement mages were rare among ordinary adventurers. Assignments from the heavens were often very specialized, while most became either wizards or swordsmen. There were also rare roles, reinforcement mages, healers, and even unique professions specializing in certain skills. Chris openly doubted, did reinforcement mages really use magic? And Oris confirmed that he would rely on it, noting that he currently had no sword. Chris winked and revealed to Eris a rule she clearly did not suspect. Candidates were forbidden to bring their own swords or staffs to the exam. They had to borrow weapons from the guild. He added, swords vary greatly in combat power. It all depends on their type. And to keep everything fair, both those competing and those judging had to use swords issued by the guild. Hearing this, Eris decided to borrow a guild sword, and Chris immediately gestured for the receptionist to bring another one. He noted that he had never met anyone who could simultaneously use magic and a sword, and called Eris a magical swordsman. He added that such ingenuity would be pointless if both his skills turned out to be half-hearted. When the receptionist brought the sword and the fight broke out, Chris allowed Eris to start the fight whenever he felt ready. It seemed Chris was ready to let him strike first again, but victory by a sudden attack did not bring true satisfaction. Therefore, he decided to deliver the first strike carefully and moderately. At first, he cast 4 enhancement spells on himself. At once his movements became faster, the attack tempo increased, the strike power strengthened, and the accuracy sharpened. After this, he also cast an enhancement spell on his sword. Meanwhile, Chris froze with admiration, watching Eurus's skill and how he could even enchant his sword. With incredible speed, Eurus rushed at the examiner simultaneously. And finally, he cunningly cast 4 devitalizing spells on Chris and his sword. He instantly applied effects. Movement and attack speed slowed down, and the attack power and chance to hit Chris sharply dropped. Chris was stunned by Eris's incredible strength, while his body and sword felt as if he were dragging a mountain, couldn't comprehend what had happened in such a short time. With a lightning-fast strike, Eris hit successfully. But instead of hitting Chris, it knocked off his wig, which now lay discarded on the ground. The spectators were completely baffled by this, and Eris thought it was an unexpected turn and entirely beyond his control. Now standing right behind Chris, Eris sincerely apologized for that unexpected prank, and Chris, noticeably trembling both in voice and body, quickly calmed him down. Don't worry. However, Eris still felt a slight guilt over Chris's embarrassment. In this decisive duel, he had no intention of holding back. He activated the step enhancement magic. He swiftly drew a perfectly precise magic circle and carefully directed its energy into his feet. Then he burst out with such stunning speed that he seemed to dissolve into the air before everyone's eyes, while Chris stood unable to comprehend our sudden disappearance. Eris quietly appeared right behind his back and firmly pressed the cold blade of the sword to Chris' neep, which meant the end of the duel and secured Eris's victory. Chris accepted the defeat with dignity, and the other candidates froze in admiration. They saw such incredible power that even the judge gave up. They could hardly understand who this new candidate was, who so easily defeated an examiner of rank C. Chris and Oris exchanged greetings and briefly introduced themselves to each other. Chris then asked if he was really the magician from the hero squad. Eris instantly denied it. It was hard to believe that Chris could seriously think that a member of the hero squad would undergo such exams. At that moment, intently staring at Chris's shiny bald head, Oris apologized, but Chris quickly waved it off and reassured him, "I understand, you didn't mean it." At that very moment, Eris suddenly suggested instantly growing his hair, and it so stunned Chris that he couldn't help but ask if that was even possible. Without hesitating for a second, Eris placed his hand on Chris's head, and at that very moment, his bald spot miraculously transformed into a luxurious, thick mane of dark hair. Chris simply froze, speechless. Overwhelmed with emotions, Chris sincerely thanked him. And Eris was instantly recognized as having passed the test, advancing him directly to the final trial. Soon Eris reached the northeastern Istal forest near the village of Bergen. This was where the final exam was to take place, and his task was a quest to collect the necessary items. The receptionist had earlier informed him that his task was to gather 20 herbs of life force for the potion. He had only 5 tough hours. He could either completely avoid fights or engage in them, but do so in a way to quickly and efficiently collect the required herbs. Life force herbs are the main ingredient of elixirs that restore both health and mana. In high-rank hunting grounds, they grew abundantly, nourished by the powerful magical energy around. Horatio pondered, gathering 20 herbs in 5 hours is not easy for an E-rank adventurer, but the registrar advised him to try hard, because success would bring a reward. Eris was very happy about this prospect. Any way to earn money always appealed to her. The Istal forest itself was quite high level and well suited for adventurers, and the local monsters were usually manageable for a single traveler. Walking deeper into the forest, he soon came across a cluster of about 10 herds right in front of him and confidently noted that gathering 20 would not be difficult. Suddenly, Green appeared out of nowhere. A wild rodent-like creature lunged at him at full speed, and upon its sudden appearance, Eris instantly assessed that despite weak defense, the attack power of this being was incredibly savage due to its extremely sharp and poisonous fangs. However, Eurus suddenly struck the rat with a strong kick. It flew across the ground with a crash. The smarter the monsters were, the more tricks they had, and those creatures that caught his eye wisely retreated, which would undoubtedly make Russ's task easier. After some time, he finally gathered all the necessary herbs and decided to set off. He headed back to the guild. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, he heard a piercing scream of a girl who was desperately calling for help, and Arrows moved on to investigate the noise. He came across a young girl who was being ambushed by a sinister horde of blue wolves. Without clear landmarks in their territory, lone travelers often found it difficult to thoroughly scout the surroundings. Suddenly, the wolf lunged forward and attacked the girl Celia, sinking its sharp fangs into her wrist. The defense of Celia shattered to pieces, and its equipment did not help at all. She desperately tried to get the healing potion, but he accidentally slipped from her hands and rolled onto the ground. Those fierce beasts bared sharp fangs and froze, ready to pounce. Then he instantly lunged at her. Throwing her backward, she crashed into a tree with a dull thud. Celia stretched with her last strength toward the discarded healing potion, but it remained completely out of her reach. Suddenly, the wolf menacingly loomed over her, ready to pounce, but Eris could no longer endure this horror, and watch any longer stealing experience was taboo among adventurers. First, Eris decided not to interfere in their fight, but seeing helpless Celia, he could no longer stand aside. Easily casting a powerful enhancement spell created specifically for women, he significantly increased her defense and magical resistance, also boosting her healing power and making her movements much faster. Then he cunningly cast weakening spells on the aggressive creatures. Their movements slowed, attacks lost strength, and even accuracy dropped. Finally, he empowered himself, and just at that moment the wolves attacked her. Celia instinctively closed her eyes, overwhelmed by horror, but when she cautiously opened them again, she froze with surprise when an unfamiliar figure appeared nearby, actively helping her deal with the monstrous wolves, while meanwhile Eris calmly advised her to stay close to him because danger still lurked around. Suddenly he realized, the true essence of buff magic is to grant properties, and most of its effects can be replicated. In other words, buff magic can really be turned into a weapon. Then Eris boldly cast a formidable, visible magic circle, and in an instant destroyed the entire horde of wolves, leaving Celia completely speechless. Several wolves, lucky to survive his first attack, immediately fled the scene, and Eris gently grabbed her shoulder and pulled her closer, saying she was standing very close to the smoldering flame. Warning that falling under that influence could have serious consequences, yet the proximity of another girl greatly distracted Eris. His cheeks reddened, but he managed to keep himself under control. He knew he could not afford to be distracted in such an extraordinary situation. Shortly after, they safely escaped the immediate threat. They joked around a bit in front of him and sincerely thanked him for the timely help, but Eurus just waved it off. It was no big deal for him. Celia said that was too mild and asked if he was a high-ranking adventurer. To her surprise, he replied that officially he was not yet an adventurer and would become one only after returning those herbs to the guild. He also inquired why Celia herself was in such a dangerous place and grimly added that without sufficient strength, lone travelers could pay with their lives. But her initial hesitation quickly turned into iron determination when she confidently said she wanted to become a heroine. He asked if she wanted to join the team of heroes, and her face lit up with excitement when she answered him. She told him that once a hero had saved her. Since then, heroes had become her greatest inspiration. She admitted that she had been cutting down high-level monsters to efficiently accumulate experience points. But now, after nearly losing her life due to her recklessness, she deeply reflected on her imprudent actions. Eris then directly told her that the swordsman's place in the hero's squad was already taken. And ahead of the one who would go this way, there awaited a rather thorny road, but Celia assured him not to worry, she was not a swordsman. However, he stubbornly insisted that she used a sword, even though she was not a swordsman herself. Celia immediately replied that her path did not fit into any usual job, and she was firmly convinced that one of the rarest, unique professions must exist in the world. Then she confessed with obvious admiration that she was a sword saint. Meanwhile, at the opposite end of the village Bergam, in the southeast, near the grave of the de-jurled soldier, the former hero's squad Eris was so impressed their share of experience points suddenly increased. They even noted that this was an incredibly profitable method, just expel someone from the guild. Nardo confidently said that they would definitely recoup the costs of those potions. Others also said that enhancement magic could easily be replaced by simple potions from the shop, and that it seemed expelling Oris was indeed the right decision. Then they all together rush into battle with a fierce wyvern. Meanwhile, some noticed that the monsters seemed unusually strong that day. They barely keep up the pace, desperately fighting an incredibly strong creature. They could not help but feel that his attacks were terribly powerful and incredibly harsh. In the heat of the battle, one of the comrades even took out a potion of strength for them to drink. Meanwhile, Nardo let out a piercing scream and ordered them to take the monster seriously. After a joint struggle and numerous attempts, finally they managed to defeat the wyvern. Nardo noted that they could easily handle even a formidable enemy on their own. He insisted that it was just a coincidence that this particular wyvern turned out to be so strong. Then he ordered them not to stop, but the others could not help exchanging wary glances. They did not dare to say anything reckless in front of Nardo. Instead, Celia enthusiastically told Ares about her unique job. She explained that the Holy Sword is a unique position without any analogs, and if she succeeds, she will be able to become the highest embodiment of a swordsman. She firmly believed that even she could become a hero if she put in the necessary effort, and with incredible dedication collected experience points in turn. Eris explained that being a hero is not just glitter and rainbows, and that a high price had to be paid for it. Celia replied that she knew being a hero was hard, but she was determined to set out on an adventure with Eris and felt she had no other choice but to become a heroine. She simply pronounced his name, and Eris was breathless. He froze in amazement when his name suddenly emerged from nowhere in the conversation. Then Harris asked why she even wanted to go on an adventure with him. Celia casually admitted that she had fallen in love with him and wanted to go on an adventure together to become closer. Hearing this frank confession, Eris softly laughed. But he quickly assured her that he was not laughing at her dreams at all. He asked in surprise how she could trust him so easily if they had just met. She replied that he risked his life to save her. She also told about a terrifying memory 3 years ago when the Demon King's army invaded her native village Ruria. The demon grabbed her and immediately declared that he would get rid of her. He considered her inexperienced. Just when she was on the brink of death, she was saved by a team of heroes. Even one hero extended a gentle hand, offering her help. The scene turned to the present, and Eris suddenly remembered that once in the village of Ruria, where their band of heroes briefly stopped, he saved a child her age, and he was allowed sure that it was Celia, saved from the Ranjit family. The silly events suddenly began to enchant him as if. He asked confusedly how he knew such exact details. But when she looked closer, all the pieces quickly came together into a picture, and she noticed an impressive resemblance to that boy 3 years ago. Suddenly, it dawned on her that Eris was the very same legendary hero. Eris now fully understood that he was considered a fool, and inquired how a member of the hero's band takes the adventurer exam. Eris calmly told her that he was suddenly expelled from the ranks of heroes. And now he was only a novice adventurer, and Celia was trembling with excitement. Suddenly she came across her rescuer. She was so stunned that she could not hold back and threw herself into Eris's arms, the very person she had long dreamed of meeting. He then asked if she really wanted to form a party with him. Celia answered with unwavering determination it suits her perfectly. Seeing her resolute expression, Horace thought that it seemed she really intended to stay. Soon they reached the guild house, and the receptionist froze in surprise upon seeing their early rival. When she inquired about the herbs of life force, Horace instantly summoned his inventory portal. With a deft gesture, he displayed all the collected herbs and creatures he had defeated right in front of her, subtly hinting that she might as well buy some materials. Seeing the inventory portal, the receptionist froze in amazement and immediately asked what this secret was. However, Harris categorically refused to tell. They say it was a company secret, but in reality, it was his slot skill it allowed opening a gate to another dimension using his enhancement magic. It was a side effect he accidentally obtained when using speed magic to interfere with spacetime. But no one else ever opened it, so for the party of heroes it became almost useless. The receptionist smiled and asked him to wait a minute while she handled the purchase. She also warmly congratulated him. He had successfully passed the adventurer's exam. She handed him the guild card and asked him to take good care of it. After all, reissuing it would cost a considerable some 10,000 jewels. Just then Celia intervened and said that she wanted to create a new party. In a moment Eris and Celia left the old house. The team formation was finally complete, and Celia suggested stopping by the nearby diner before returning. But Eris admitted that night he had nowhere to spend the night, and therefore it was absolutely necessary to find a place immediately. Celia, so calm and unpretentious, offered him to stay at the same inn where she had already spent the night. Oris tried to explain that if she were a man, there would be no problems, but he feared that something might happen if they decided to live in the same room. But the explanation, it seems, did not reach her thick head, and she, with big innocent eyes, asked if he would like to share a room with her. He could not resist her simple innocence, and decided for now to go to the diner. Soon they entered the diner, and before them appeared several incredibly delicious dishes. Seeing the huge portions, Eris wondered if she would be able to eat them all. She smiled and reassured him, "Don't worry, I really eat a lot." Then he, unsure, asked if she was really serious about letting him stay in her room. She unquestionably agreed and, beaming with joy, said that she could eat that much and even have her wrist next to her favorite person. Later she realized that the portion was indeed a bit too large for her appetite, but Eris offered to finish it for her. She said that she really didn't need to force herself. Joris began eating with the same spoon as she did. Her face changed instantly. She wondered if it was an indirect kiss. Seeing her surprised expression, he asked if everything was okay, and she desperately tried to say that everything was fine. Soon they reached her room, and Joris noticed that she was doing quite well. In turn, a silly remark was made about. She carefully chose this very tavern after trying several others. Seeing the spacious room, he said that there was enough space here for him to rest comfortably. But as soon as he began spreading the sheet on the floor, she asked what he was doing. She then noted that he should rest in a proper bed, otherwise he might get sick. Embarrassed by her direct remark, Oris awkwardly tried to explain the nature of the problem when a boy and a girl share one bunk. Her innocent puppy eyes appeared again, and she gently asked if he really didn't like the idea of resting with her. Harris again couldn't resist and finally agreed. Lying down in the same bunk as she did, he was very embarrassed, especially when she lay very close. At that moment Celia quietly laughed and said that his trembling breath tickled her neck, and he immediately turned away. But because of the rather narrow bed, her body was still pressed against his, and Eris Faye even blushed. The next morning the risk was noticed. He was energetically doing push-ups, because refined wizard skills are not acquired overnight. They required both endurance and deep knowledge. Hints from ancient books of spells and myths proved vital. It was then that Celia woke up, cheerfully greeted him with good morning, and asked why he got up so early. Eris replied that he was simply doing his daily gymnastics and had just done 1,000 push-ups, crunches, and squats. She fell silent in shock upon hearing about his strict daily routine and asked if he really followed it regularly. He casually asked if it wasn't a usual routine for everyone, and she immediately denied it. This made him think that those heroes from his former party might have mocked the real effectiveness. With a worried expression, she pointed out that although training is indeed important, he should not exhaust himself to such extremes. In response, Eris frankly admitted he wants to overthrow the Demon King and then live in peace, assuring that he will devote all his strength to this. He added that if they manage to defeat the Demon King, the ubiquitous magical energy will disappear and they will no longer have to fight again. In this world, substances in the air usually did not harm people, but they could awaken various monsters. The Demon King amplified this magical energy through powerful barriers, and the monsters simply went insane. The irony was that Oris had to become stronger precisely to avoid bringing matters to a fight. Celia said that everyone truly dreams of a peaceful life, but then sadly asked, are his ambitions not too great? Eris could not disagree with her, but such an explanation was still hard to fully comprehend. Then he began to tell an old story, the very one that happened 6 years ago, where in their real village, a gorilla dungeon suddenly appeared. Unlike ordinary dungeons, if this dungeon is not cleared by sunset, monsters will relentlessly pour out from its depths. At that time, both of Oris's parents were respected rank adventurers and entrusted the evacuation of villagers to him. Although Eris insisted on fighting alongside them, they did not want to involve him. He was not even an adventurer, yet in such a clash. His parents were extremely strong, but that day he felt an ominous premonition. It was exactly that day he turned 13 years old, and his parents promised to celebrate it with him. But the dungeon remained untouched when the sun set, and due to the relentless flow of monsters, even more adventurers tragically died. Even as a child, Oris understood what had happened to his parents and vowed to grow strong to avenge them both. Silly remembered how a gorilla dungeon appeared in the city and sighed with relief. Fortunately, he survived the attack. Harris insisted that even more incidents like the real ones would happen if the Demon King was not defeated. He resolutely decided at any cost not to allow such disasters. He apologized once again for spoiling the mood, but Celia said that this was an extremely important topic that needed to be discussed. But Eris believed there was no point in being stuck in the past, and she advised them to eat a little before heading to the guild. Celia smiled gently and advised to take a quest immediately upon arrival. Soon they reached the guild, and Euryscon persistently insisted that without true teamwork, dreaming of victory over the Demon King was pointless, and that strengthening the entire group was vital. First of all, he thought about making Celia stronger, so firmly deciding, he chose a task in one specific area. When Silly asked if he had come across any suitable adventure, Oris nodded decisively and handed her a letter with the task. It was a request to exterminate monstrous birds. She said that she was not sure how much help she could provide in this mission, but he told her directly that this quest was created specifically for her today. Although this would be a small challenge for Celia, the experience points she would gain would be simply enormous. But she seemed reluctant to take on the task. She said that her attacks would not reach the birds. He asked if she really could not defeat flying enemies with a sword, and she explained that it was impossible from any side. Seeing her determined reaction, a troubling risk appeared. She might become too obsessed with her own principles and would not be able to truly reveal her talent as a sword saint, so it was extremely important for her to overcome this obstacle. Without hesitation, he offered to teach her a simple trick so that she could complete that quest. As the day slowly faded, they soon found themselves on South Road 227 near the village of Belva. Eris offered to show a technique. When a monstrous bird attacked him, he calmly instructed her to infuse magic into the sword, squeeze it, and at the moment of the swing imagine that it was being strengthened. Celia was stunned by his display of power, but he still had a few amazing tricks up his sleeve. As soon as he threw a blazing beam of magical waves into the sky and instantly destroyed everything around, he froze in that spot and proclaimed his faith. That even she could perform this feat the same way, but she refused, shaking her head persistently. He asked himself how such a thing could have happened. He returned the sword to her, but on the first try she could barely grasp it. He then began to explain in detail that the whole secret was in relaxed shoulders and in letting the magic flow smoothly when she swings the sword. Remembering the advice, Celia obeyed and swung the sword, but her movements were quite awkward and inexperienced. Seeing this, Eris came closer, firmly grabbed her by both hands, and suggested they swing together a little. This act so confused Celia that she blushed all over. Noticing her tension, he, suspecting nothing, asked if everything was all right, but she quickly dismissed the question and tried to focus on training. With a short command, he ordered her to breathe in unison and to strengthen her magic with a steady rhythm. Embarrassed and forced, she released a fierce beam of magic from the sword, which instantly struck and knocked down the monstrous bird. Eris encouraged her not to lose the rhythm, and to try on her own. She obeyed, and did it independently. Her strikes constantly missed the target, but he did not stop encouraging her. Keep doing everything you can. Even when her attacks were slightly off target, Celia trained relentlessly, and very soon, barely straining, she mastered the technique he taught her. Her accuracy rapidly increased. In a moment it became clear, only one monster remained to be defeated to successfully complete the quest. Meanwhile, Eris did not tire of praising her as a sword saint for her extraordinary skills. But he warned her, don't relax, stay vigilant until the very end. Eris was on alert, ready to back up if something went wrong, but it seemed they would complete the quest without any problems. Just then his attention was instantly captured when Silly told him about the magical birds, which were now completely fleeing the scene. But their retreat looked strange for creatures that were only scared by eyelashes, because little magical birds usually did not break formation unless something really serious happened. At that very moment, a huge shimmer appeared before his eyes. This completely caught Celia by surprise, and she anxiously asked what she could do in such a situation. But Eris showed neither fear nor surprise. He calmly noted that this last target simply came to him by chance. He thought that Celia had effortlessly taken down all the magical birds with one strike, and with the power she had now, she should have no problem handling that wyvern herself, but he was gripped by terrible anxiety. She asked if he really wanted her to handle that monster alone, and he calmly explained that it was actually easier for her to hit such a large target than those tiny birds. Instantly Silly realized this really was an easier target. But her determination wavered the moment she saw the fierce beast with sharp fangs. Seeing her lose composure, Iris rushed to calm her down. She resolutely declared that she was more than ready to defeat that creature with her skills, especially after mastering new techniques and gaining experience in battles. She noticeably calmed down and instantly pulled herself together. She decisively decided on one last attempt. When she struck again, a magical beam burst forth and hit the wyvern, piercing its thick scales, and Celia could hardly believe her eyes. She had truly defeated that monster on her own. Without hesitation, she immediately hugged Eris and thanked him for teaching her, but he modestly said that he had done almost nothing, just showed her the technique, and then advised Celia to believe in her own strength a little more. He suggested returning to the village, and she smiled and affectionately called him too modest because he did not want to admit how invaluable his help was. Soon they returned to the guild and happily reported at the reception that the quest was completed, who seemed to be very impressed both that there was enough space and how skillfully time was managed. But he admitted during that quest he did not fight at all. Instead, only Celia dealt with the magical birds with her sword. He only noted that all he did was simply watch her performance from behind, and all the success was entirely her merit. The receptionist could not believe that Celia could defeat that multitude of magical birds with just her sword. He considered it physically impossible. Yet still, Celia stepped forward and admitted that Eris taught her an amazing spell. She even praised him, saying that he teaches exceptionally skillfully and could effortlessly make the impossible possible. Eris thought he only wanted to support Celia from the sidelines, but did not expect her to so openly praise him right in front of the receptionist. He could not help but blush from her admiring compliments. Then he smoothly interrupted the conversation, deliberately steering the topic away from himself, and reported the completion of their mission. She immediately rushed to check the delivered materials, but she felt as if something was missing. He calmly reassured her and instantly produced the other thing that was missing. It turned out to be the very same huge wyvern that Celia had defeated earlier, and the girl at the reception froze in shock when this formidable creature appeared right before her, and doubted whether it was really the wyvern that Celia had defeated. But Rizik looked genuinely puzzled and asked if his appearance really shocked her that much. Without hesitation, she stated that it truly shocked her. Because this wyvern was one of the strongest magical beasts, even adventurers of rank found it very difficult to defeat it. Aerith was genuinely surprised. He had no idea he possessed such powerful strength. It seemed the party of heroes had dealt with similar creatures without any struggle, and the receptionist thought they themselves were very strong. And at that very moment, Horace inquired whether the wyvern material would bring good money, and the receptionist assured that it would significantly increase their income. Then she instantly appraised the wyvern end. Meanwhile, she noted that the quest was completed, and then took out their guild IDs. Their quest completion points updated now 30 out of 100, and they were also given 1 guild point for the quest. She also told him that as soon as those points reached 10, he would advance to the next rank. By diligently completing quests and collecting these points, everyone eventually raised their traveler rank. Rank then Silly asked if they could just level up by completing easier quests, and the receptionist calmly replied that it would not be a problem. But she strictly noted that to advance further, one must complete at least one task from each rank, so that unworthy adventurers would not sneak into higher ranks. The receptionist immediately added that they were clearly not for the E rank, their extraordinary abilities and incredible strength prove it. Strength, and at that moment, their evaluation was completed. She could hardly believe her eyes when she saw such a large amount on the list. She revealed that the reward for their quest was 50,000 gems, and for the ransom of the wyvern itself, they would have to pay another 50,000 jewels. When they left the guild house, Silly was torn by anxiety. She did not know what to do with such a large sum. She had never held so much money before and was afraid it might be stolen. Eris calmly assured her that they would just go hunting again, but Celia, with a worried face, said that those were the same hard-earned money of Eris. Hearing this, Orst immediately suggested splitting the 50,000 payment for the application between themselves and giving the reward for the wyvern entirely to Celia. He recalled how his former team of heroes constantly argued over the division of loot. But this time Eris wanted to be as fair as possible in the distribution, because it was Celia herself who brought down the wyvern, although she insisted she was not alone. They said that without him they would not have been able to defeat it, and insisted that he receive the full amount. Hearing this, Oris could not stand it and called kind. Gently suggested that she temporarily allow him to hold the money. Putting the pouch into his item slot, he said he would use the money to buy suitable weapons for Celia. She then drew her current sword from its sheath and said that it was quite a good weapon. But Eris guessed that it was probably a decent sword from the bazaar. Then he said that although it was a good sword, simply saying that the sword will reveal its true power is not enough, and it will soon realize that this is lacking in many things. He advised thinking ahead and buying a better sword in advance, and Celia was impressed. Couldn't believe he thought so far ahead. He confidently stated that for those 100,000 valuables they received, they can even order themselves a custom sword. Hearing this, Silius's face lit up with delight. She asked if it was a gift from him, and he only replied that it was a reward for her efforts. At the same time, the members of the former Eurus Heroes team barely managed and finally realized that kicking Eris out of the group was a big mistake. Although one of them was ready to at least somewhat compensate with potions and her healing skills, it was clearly not enough to fix the damage they were now suffering. Others began to wonder, was Eurus weakening the monsters and at the same time strengthening them? But another sadly said that he had never heard anything about such a possibility. They recalled how back then, without hesitation, they expelled Eris. Nardo forced him to be silent, and they realized that Eris was really trying to convey something important before his exile. Now they finally felt, all this time Eris had quietly been supporting them behind their backs. One of the female members even said that if she had known the truth earlier, she would never have allowed Nardo to convince her to exile the heir. Nardo suddenly lunged at her and grabbed her shirt tightly, accusing her of hypocrisy and claiming that she was also secretly weaving intrigues. And now they treated him as if he were a villain. Moreover, he shouted that they all together decided to exile Eris from the group, so now they were all equally guilty. Trembling, she apologized to him, and Nardo advised her to stop living in the past and instead move forward. Most importantly, he asked about the supplies of healing potion, and she replied that she had already spent the money allocated for this month. Without hesitation, he simply ordered her to go to the store and buy more. She sighed and said that the repair of their equipment after yesterday's brutal clash cost 800,000 jewels, and added that if such problems continued, next month's rent payment would suffer greatly. Nardo was silent for a moment, then quietly said that Eris was a comrade who had gone on adventures shoulder to shoulder with them, and that he would not refuse if Eris wanted to rejoin their group. It was clear that Nardo did not want to humiliate himself before his comrades after personally exiling Eurus. He believed that if he was not careful, the balance of power in the group would be completely overturned. He suddenly decided, and everyone immediately picked it up, almost without arguing. Nardo also promised, if he encounters Eris again, he will personally ask him to return. Meanwhile, the girl firmly stated that after such an exile, Eros would never return, but the other members quickly made her keep silent. They emphasized that the very fact Nardo even changed his mind was a big step forward. Moreover, he said that Eris did not even have the qualifications for adventures, and without them, he would no longer be able to take orders. They were convinced that he had no other choice but to return. He could not earn money or find new comrades, but they did not know the most important thing. Eurus had already created a new team with his extremely reliable partner Celia. Meanwhile, in the weapon restoration workshop, the sellers refused Eris, saying that they only take what is already in stock, and custom orders are very difficult to fulfill. Celia involuntarily thought, by toppling that weaver, she earned as much as 50,000 gems, and she could not even afford a custom sword for herself. Eris suggested trying to convince the weapon merchants in the capital. At that moment, his attention was distracted by. Nearby, people were whispering, wondering. The dwarf recently refused a job offer that was worth a whole fortune in jewels, and no one could understand what could convince him. In this world, dwarves were famous for incredible craftsmanship, and Eurus himself once heard legends about that master from their clan back when he was in the hero squad. Without hesitation, Oris approached the people and asked them to tell more details. The man noticed that Eris seemed familiar to him and asked if he was also interested in that master dwarf. Oris nodded in response, and Celia said with admiration that she wanted a powerful sword made to order. The man admitted that they also went there hoping to find good weapons, but that old dwarf turned out to be too stubborn and simply did not accept their request. Moreover, they told him that the dwarf set a condition: he would create only for those whom he himself considered worthy. And they accepted only based on one thing: the skill of wielding a sword. Then, Eris pulled out a map and asked if they could indicate where he was. The man unambiguously pointed to a certain direction on the map. Seeing that the workshop was quite close, Celia decided to go there the same day. At that moment, her stomach suddenly growled loudly, and she blushed to her ears, trying somehow to justify the awkward sound. But Eris decided that it was better for them to set off to the workshop the next day. Instead, they asked her not to overexert herself when she was so hungry. As if out of nowhere, a young girl named Sherrod accidentally bumped into a burly man and scraped her knee without hesitation. Horace immediately rushed to her and instantly healed her wound. Cheryl was stunned, seeing with her own eyes how her wounded knee miraculously healed. She sincerely thanked and instantly left. Celia wanted to compliment his kindness, but her stomach betrayed her again. It growled loudly, and she felt completely humiliated. Eris's soft laughter only irritated her more, so she scolded him for not being nice. The next morning they arrived at the infamous dwarf Gale's workshop, and knocking on the sturdy gates. Suddenly a short old man appeared and sharply asked what they were doing here. Eris apologized for coming without warning and introduced himself when he was created. He was looking for a true master. Gale shook his head in disbelief and said that Eris was just another adventurer chasing after weapons. Eris told him that they wanted to order a sword for Celia, and Gale without hesitation asked if she really deserved his custom-made sword. Before asking to see her current weapon, carefully examining her sword, he noted that although her potential was truly impressive, she still lacked refined skill. He was convinced that if he entrusted his sword to some inexperienced person, she would simply abuse its power, and her funny expression turned somber as she accepted it. She decided that she must hone her skills before daring to return, seeing how easily they give up. Gale said with surprise that after the refusal, they didn't even try to bribe anyone to get inside, and Eurus replied that Gale looks like a person who can't be bought with gold. Gold, and in general, he didn't have enough money to buy himself entry. Gale, although feeling relief from this honesty, stuck to his opinion, and just at that moment, as if out of nowhere, Sherrod suddenly appeared and asked in surprise if Grandpa was sending travelers away empty-handed again. It was then that she met Eris and Celia and sincerely thanked them for the invaluable help yesterday. Embarrassed, Gale asked if she knew them, and Sherrod answered affirmatively. Soon she revealed everything that had happened the day before. Oris couldn't believe it. The child they saved turned out to be his granddaughter, and it seemed they really managed to break through Gale's stone shell. It seems he softened a bit when he heard about what happened yesterday. Then Gale said that they were not the bad people he initially thought them to be, and that he would immediately give them his sword. Celia blossomed with joy upon hearing his announcement. Sherrod said that her grandfather simply didn't want anyone to abuse his precious swords. Gale noted with concern, if the adventurers are weak, the villain will easily take the sword from them. Then he set 3 decisive conditions before them. Firstly, Eris would train diligently and master the swordsmanship of Celia. Secondly, he would wield a sword forged by Gale himself. Having learned that Gale would make a sword for him on order, besides Celia's. Eris continued to interrogate him. Gale immediately stated that, in his opinion, Eris was the most skillful swordsman, and Celia had the greatest potential as a swordswoman. When Eris heard this, he tried to explain that he was not a swordsman, but just a wizard, but Gale did not back down and firmly said that he did not care about all these titles. He said that as long as they were pure and strong swordsmen, that was enough for him after all. It was his most cherished dream as a craftsman. Eris then asked if his last condition concerned gold. Gale waved it off, saying that he already had more than enough wealth. Then he announced the last condition, to bring more than a kilogram of spirit stone. Soon Eris and Celia found themselves in the embrace of the dense bergam forest in the land called the Forest of Spirits. Eris could not help but say that Gale had indeed set the toughest conditions for their final task. In that forest, the energy of the spirits slowly and imperceptibly accumulated in various magical creatures. And at the very top of the food chain, predators gathered the most. Celia cautiously struck the monsters with her sword so that Eris could examine the stones they left behind. He noticed with disappointment that even the large ones gave only about 30 of the required amount, and Celia could not help but emphasize, encountering the strongest monsters is pure luck. Eris said they would have to be patient in their search, and Celia jokingly asked if the monsters could just come to them on their own. When he heard this, an idea instantly formed in his mind, and he announced that they would lure the strongest monster with bait. But when she started asking about it, Iris directly said it would be him, and Celia simply froze in shock. It was not at all senseless. Eris decided to present himself as bait, carefully adjusting his magical flow to lure the large predators who would sense the fluctuations of magical power. Eris was confident, if he could just hold back a powerful surge of magic and release it in one burst, the largest beast in the forest would definitely reveal itself. Eris instantly put his plan into action, and as he predicted, the most terrifying monster of the forest burst out. There were thunderous steps that ominously shook the ground. Celia was clearly frightened by its sudden appearance, and Eris quickly covered her mouth so she would not make a sound. It was at that moment. Again, a gigantic, terrible monster fully appeared in the field of view, and Celia was gripped by pure horror. Meanwhile, Eris indifferently noted that given the enormous size of the beast, they might obtain a truly gigantic spirit stone. But the predatory animal ruled over the entire forest, which everyone knew as Behemoth, a fierce enemy whom even Russ's former team could not defeat in his heroic days. Eris instantly came up with a plan and ordered Celia to jump back immediately after the attack while he distracted its attention. He instantly drew a magic circle right behind himself, attracting the monster's attention, and the enraged creature rushed at him swiftly. At the opposite corner of the field, Celia successfully released a beam of magic and hit the bull exactly. In a commanding tone, Ares sharply shouted for her to dodge, simultaneously creating an arrow from his mighty wind magic. Despite Behemoth's natural affinity to the earth, Celia and Eris cleverly combined their magical powers and unleashed them toward Behemoth with all destructive force. When the monster lay defeated before them, Celia's eyes sparkled with disbelief. She could not fully believe that they had handled Behemoth themselves. She praised Oris's incredible strength, but he modestly said he could not have done it alone. She insisted that she was just following his orders, and Eurus did not persist any longer and let the matter go. Moreover, he insisted that a monster of such caliber must give a huge spirit stone, so they went to examine the body of the fallen beast, to their wild surprise. In its stomach they found a tiny young girl with delicate wings, curled up, so small that she fit into both palms. This is a funny question, her very existence. Eris confessed that because of her unusual magical power, she might be here a spirit restrainer, and at that very moment. The girl regained consciousness and said that she had rested so well. When her gaze fell on two completely different strangers, she calmly asked who they were. Although she looked like a tiny girl, Eris instinctively felt her enormous power tens of times stronger even than giants. For now, he decided to behave cautiously around her and not do anything that might scare her. Without hesitation, Celia approached her, introduced herself as part of the rest of the group, and despite his anxiety, even introduced him on his behalf. The girl enthusiastically introduced herself as Sylph, the infamous forest spirit, and Eris, seeing this, understood with relief that only he would have to worry. He blushed with shame because of his suspicion, but Silly, on the contrary, noticed that he was strangely shy. And he himself said that so deep in the mountains, people are encountered extremely rarely. When they were further questioned about their affairs, Eris confessed without hesitation that they had come to look for spirit stones. Feeling this, he froze for a moment before focusing all his strength to create a sturdy stone chair. Eurus was stunned to see the highest spirit stone right before him, and immediately declared that he wanted to possess this extraordinary thing. Sylph, without hesitation, quickly handed him the stone, and generously offered to make them even a double portion. Eris could not contain her admiration for that thing. He pondered its incredible weight after all. Even 1 kilogram of spirit stone was considered an extraordinary rarity. Although for him it was a true dream come true, he noted that its size simply exceeded what they could afford. Without any hesitation, Sylph innocently remarked that she could produce as many batches of those stones as she wished. Then Celia quietly and seriously explained to her that the spirit stones were born from excess magical energy, and even from the largest beasts, usually only a palm-sized stone could be extracted. There was nothing even slightly larger on the market. What stood before them was truly considered priceless. Eris also gently told her that she could not simply take such a priceless item without giving anything in return. She simply said that she wanted to travel. He, a little uncertain, asked if that was really all she wanted, and she nodded. Moreover, Celia inquired whether spirits like her were really allowed to be outside the forest, and assured them that she could survive for several years outside the forest. With a sad expression, she confessed that she had been completely alone for so long, stuck in that dim forest. And it really was suffocating her, moreover. Finally, she admitted, just talking with them significantly lifted her spirits and warmed her soul. Eris and Celia exchanged a glance, and Oris extended his hand, inviting me to join their adventure. When Eurus activated the item slot to place a spirit stone in it, Self froze in astonishment and asked if he could enter the spirit world himself. He was clearly puzzled by her words, so she decided to show by example quickly fitting half of her body into the item slot. Suddenly Eris realized that what he had long considered his personal item slot was actually the spirit world all along. He told himself that it was incredibly spacious there, and more importantly, she said with admiration that for a human to have access to the spirit world was a true miracle. At the same time, Celia praised Eris, calling him amazing, and he couldn't understand why she was so proud of him. She informed Sylph that she could freely travel from the spirit world and that Eris had now effectively become a spirit, and Sylph jokingly called him Dad. It truly fascinated him. Seeing that he was completely frozen with admiration, she asked if she had said something wrong, but Eris replied that she had come out of the belly of the behemoth, so technically she was his child. But she completely ignored his remark and continued calling Celia Mom, and Celia, without any worries at all, playfully immersed herself in her game. Self asked if she did not like being called Mom, but Silly, with an innocent smile, assured that she was truly happy to finally have a family. She looked tenderly, her cheeks blushed, and then announced that Eurus had finally become a father too. Hearing this, Eris froze in complete shock and silence, as if suddenly Celia and he were already a couple. He asked himself if he was feeling unwell, and asked Silly if he really disliked being called Dad that much. Seeing their sweet, innocent faces, Eris could not resist. He simply gave in and allowed their mischievous, reckless pranks. In a few moments, the three arrived at the village, and Self was simply stunned. He had never seen so many people. Eris thought they were looking at him because Self was standing behind. Seeing how those people looked so intently, she became embarrassed and suddenly struck herself in the spirit world. But out of nowhere, right before him, appeared Eris's former hero team, the same people who had so cruelly kicked him out of their squad. Seeing them, Eros sharply asked what they wanted from him, and Nardo asked him not to be so cold, reminding that they were former comrades. Eris could not understand why they appeared out of nowhere, right after he was kicked out of the party, but Nardo admitted that since Eris left. It seemed everyone had many thoughts in their heads. Moreover, he doubted whether Eris did not feel the absence of his former comrades. He also added that, if he wished, he could agree to accept him back into the hero party. Nardo added that Eris Neen is still listed in the hero's party registry, hinting that his return is only a matter of time and that he still has a chance to rejoin the party. Only 3 days passed without decisive magical help from Eris, and Nardo and the others lost their pride much faster than he expected. Eris, uttering a quiet sly smirk, noticed that everyone seemed to misunderstand something extremely important. He burst out asking if they really wanted him to return to the party, and sharply noted that they themselves seemed to have no idea which side they were on. At that phrase, everyone froze for a moment. And Nardo sharply replied that it seemed Eris was mistaken about their intentions, and the other members warned him as soon as he leaves the hero's path, his rise to power will end, emphasizing that this is his last chance. But Eris blandly told them that he didn't care about being a hero or climbing the ranks, and instantly pulled the defeated giant out of the inventory portal right above them, adding that he was completely satisfied with where he was now. He sincerely added that he never intended to return to the hero's squad for him. The most important thing now was that on the road he had made truly important friends. Boiling with rage, Nardo called him Koki and threatened to immediately erase his name from the royal cities lists, warning that Eurus would regret not listening earlier. Oris responded carefully, warning him, "Time will tell who will regret more later, so don't just do as you please." Barely had they stepped away when Solf jumped out of the portal and asked about those strangers, and Celia replied that it seemed to be Oris's former hero team. Moreover, Celia indignantly asked if it would kill them to ask more politely if they so desperately wanted him back, but Eris simply replied that their pride would never allow them to do that. She herself told them that as soon as she sensed the presence of other people besides them, she would immediately hide in the spirit world. After some time, they reached Gale's workshop and placed a chair made of spirit stone right in front of him, which left him simply frozen in shock. Gale instantly put on his glasses and carefully examined the object, not hiding his surprise at how Eurus managed to obtain such a priceless material, while Eurus just smiled and attributed it to the whims of the spirits. A remark, and there was some truth in it. Gale said enthusiastically that he had never seen such a luxurious material before. He expressed a passionate desire to immediately start working on that extraordinary creation. Gale immediately got to work, diligently shaping it with precise hammer strikes. Oris anxiously wondered whether such an action would destroy the magical formation in the spirit stone, and soon Sherrod arrived, suggesting they sit and have some tea while Gale immersed himself in his work. Over steaming cups of tea they talked, and Sher proudly said that while an ordinary blacksmith would need days for such a task, her grandfather could handle it alone with the strength of 100 men, and Celia smiled and remarked that Gale was a true braggart among grandfathers. But then they asked whether such a cunning thing could really be forged so quickly. Oris said that modern blacksmiths also possess magic. Magic, that huge wave of energy he had felt earlier bursting from Gale, only confirmed the rumors about his impressive skills. Eris asked when it would be best to return for the swords, but Sherich's answer surprised him so much that he jumped to his feet. She said everything would be ready by the end of the day. He said everything was happening too fast, and she praised her grandfather for his speed and world-famous skills. Just then Gale appeared and announced that the work was finished. He presented 2 miraculous swords before them and solemnly declared that these were undoubtedly his greatest masterpieces. As soon as Eris gripped the sword, he immediately felt its amazing lightness and lightning-fast maneuverability, and although these blades did not directly use the spiritual stone, they were filled with concentrated magic that greatly enhanced the attack power. Celia was glowing with happiness when she received her first custom saber. It was incredibly light and amazingly comfortable to handle, but Eurus immediately warned her not to swing that saber recklessly. However, all his efforts proved futile. The gentle swing of her sword caused a powerful magical explosion that completely destroyed Gale's house and left everyone stunned. Seeing the huge torn hole in the workshop ceiling, Celia clearly trembled and confusedly wondered what to do now. Gale realized that he really should not have trusted his wonderful sword to such an inexperienced amateur like her. Eurus reacted instantly, energetically summoned his healing magic, and easily patched the wide hole in the ceiling. Seeing this, Cher praised him for his incredible skills, and Gale finally sighed with relief. Celia bowed low before Gale and sincerely apologized to him for ruining his beloved house, and he gently smiled and reassured her, saying there was no need to worry, the house actually looked much cleaner than before. Moreover, Gale extracted a promise from them that Eris would take on Celia's key responsibility and master the new sword himself. He firmly believed that Eris and Celia were naturally connected. Both carefully agreed, and only then did they leave. Leaving the workshop, Celia apologized again for her recklessness, and Eris warned her, "Be careful with the new sword, it is extremely durable." It was then that Self seemed to appear out of nowhere, arched her back and stretched, yawning widely, and when he asked if she had rusted, she immediately denied it. Eris could not help but think that in some things she really was quite childish. Suddenly Celia shuddered and said that although the days are getting longer, the nights are still cold. Indeed, just then an idea sparked in her, and with a slight smile she reached out and gently squeezed Aura's palm, saying that this would warm them for now. His face uncontrollably flushed, and from the other side they ironically remarked that they really looked like a couple. But Cillian indifferently said that his hands were just very warm. She gently intertwined her fingers with his and whispered that she wanted to stay like this forever. Eris's face turned red. If she really didn't notice the awkward situation she was creating, it worried him, but at the same time he thought maybe he was just overthinking. It was then that she playfully noted that her mom and dad seemed to get along very well. She also asked if they were finally heading home, and Eris said they were going to Celia's inn. I slyly blushed and asked teasingly if they would stay in the same room together, to which Celia casually remarked that there was no free end for auras. Self exclaimed that she was incredible, jokingly calling her mom, while Eurus thought to himself that one must be extremely careful with Self. It was then that they noticed a suspicious boy in a worn hood, as if he was looking for a certain guest in a black cloak and was standing at the designated meeting place. Eurus kept walking, and suddenly a boy approached him, and when Eris asked who he was, the boy quietly gestured for him to follow into the nearest alley. A foolish question whether he really knew that person. Eris noticed that the boy did not look particularly hostile, but at the same time was interested in the circumstances. And at that very moment, something clicked in his head, and he wondered if that suspicious boy did not know that he was actually a former hero. Without thinking long, Eris rushed after the boy into the narrow alley. The boy then shyly apologized for disturbing them. And when asked who he was, he frankly admitted he was the one who bought guild cards. Moreover, he was sure Eris had extra guild cards, and when she found out about it, she patiently waited for their arrival. At the same time, Eris decisively said, a personal guild card simply cannot be extra, and trading such cards is strictly prohibited. He immediately understood that the boy had confused Eris with someone else, and as soon as he realized his mistake, he instantly darted away, suggesting they just pretend they had never met. But Oris firmly grabbed him by the hood, with a stern expression decisively said, announcing that the boy seemed fully aware of his misdeeds and would have to answer for them for the sake of peace. When he swiftly threw the boy into his spiritual world, the boy shouted that he did it only for money and swore he would not do it again. Soon Eris and Celia came to the guild house and instantly pulled out a bunch of guild cards, placing them right in front of the receptionist. This left her completely shocked when she asked what had happened, and he recounted every detail of what had happened. She admitted that the loss and theft of guild cards was an old and painful problem, but before she could add a single word, a piercing scream from a stranger tore through the air. She demanded to know if they also had her guild card. When the crowd quickly gathered and began demanding their guild cards, the receptionist desperately suggested they calm down and take their cards one by one. Seeing this chaos, Harris realized the matter was serious and apologized for making her run around like that just before closing. He inquired what would happen to the boy involved in this illegal matter. She calmly replied that he would be handed over to security and then his parents would be notified. At that moment, the boy said he had no parents, no brothers or sisters, and no one to call. It became clear he was an orphan. Aris said that he understood his feelings well because he himself knew what it was like to lose parents at such a young age. But he himself said that this in no way justifies his misdeeds, and that he would have to take full responsibility for his actions on his own. Harris then asked what would happen to the orphans, and the receptionist informed that they would probably be taken in by an educational institution in the royal capital. As soon as he heard this, Eurus sighed with relief. He believed that young orphans like them still needed to be given a decisive chance for redemption. When they set off, the boy thanked him and with a sad expression on his face said that he was incredibly struggling to make ends meet. The income was barely enough to feed himself. Eris silently observed his unkempt appearance. In the end, they concluded that he was just a petty thug, and the profits mostly filled the pockets of his boss. He firmly advised the boy to quit the underground world, especially since Eurus risked himself for him and pulled him out of a much worse fate. When they finally left, Horace noticed the same women who earlier had loudly demanded her guild card, now standing with noticeable sadness on their faces. Looking at her expression, it was clear she hardly found her lost guild card in the found stack. However, Celia's eyes barely squinted when she saw him intently looking at another woman, and pouting in irritation, she sharply declared that she was leaving. Noticing her unusual reaction, he asked if something was wrong, but she insisted that she was not angry. Although her face stubbornly remained frowning, soon they showed how they stood in front of the task board. Celia was racking her brains over which quest to choose to truly test her new sword, although she could still only take E-rank quests. Meanwhile, Eris realized that he had spent a fortune on his sword, so he decided to take on a few tasks to pay for his lodging. Silly became worried and suggested simply giving up and sticking to the usual requests, but he refused and immediately handed her a quest form, where the task was to hunt an orang golem. Golems are creatures with incredible destructive power and armor as hard as stone, but at the same time, they moved surprisingly slowly. Oris reassured her, even E-level adventurers, if there were 12 of them, could defeat this enemy, so this would also be a good target for Silly. Anxiety and gloom appeared on her face when she asked if they really were going to fight enemies that required a dozen people. But he calmly assured her that now she was not alone, as she once was when she was by herself, and under his protection she would not even be threatened with a scratch. He even praised her for being so independent. With a new wave of confidence, she agreed to take on the request, and Eurus thought to himself that praise always really lifts Silly's spirits. Arriving at the lush green forest, Silt's face lit up with delight as she admired the view. Finding this vivid landscape, I felt its vastness and freshness breathtaking. Eris thought about how she had really spent so much time locked in that dim, secluded forest, and he promised himself to fully enjoy the outside world. Then he reminded Celia of their task and instantly came up with a cunning plan. First, he would distract the Golems with his magic, and she would quickly attack from behind. While they carefully executed their plan, he himself set a bait right in front of the huge, terrifying golem. When Eris nodded at Cilia, she rushed at the golem and struck it with such destructive force that the monster split in half. She, not believing her eyes, asked if this was really the end. He confirmed it seemed so. Gale's sword was truly incredibly powerful, but such an extraordinary level of strength was not explained by this alone. Cilia believed that the Gaons in that area might be weaker than they expected, but Eris disagreed and instantly withdrew his sword, and noted that they were almost indistinguishable from ordinary golems, but when he tried to cut another one, he realized that their newly acquired weapon was truly too powerful. It seemed he was developing faster than he could realize, so he decided to tackle everything at once, stating that facing them one by one was simply pointless. Stupid question, could the golems really approach everyone at once? And Eris, instead of explanations, simply decided to show what he was capable of. He swiftly created a magic circle, subtly spreading magic over a wide area, and instantly caught the positions of all surrounding enemies. Then he successfully aimed at the last 8 golems and cast a magical spell, endowing them with a frightening aura. When those monstrous golems aggressively advanced closer, Eris calmly said that with her current strength she could now handle that many, and Celia was completely shocked Eris's trick worked flawlessly. In an extraordinarily short time, she with one smooth and precise sword movement instantly laid down all the Gauls, and Eris was simply stunned. He enthusiastically praised her. In just 2 days she had honed the technique he taught during the hunt for that terrible bird, and for the first time voluntarily took up the sword. He added that these were only the basics and ahead was still so much to learn, and from these words Cilia was truly surprised. Taking the remains of the defeated Gaons into his item slot, he remarked that she absorbed power much better than he expected. As soon as they moved away, Oris called Sylph come back, he said, and added that she really gathered a bunch of scraps, but when he looked at them more closely, he found a guild card belonging to a woman named Yukina Rembrandt, by profession a sage, a completely balanced and sensible woman who was desperately searching for her guild card. Eris enthusiastically told Cilia about the sages, explaining that they are one of those unique professions that stood alongside the holy swords. Jokingly and indifferently they asked if they also wielded a sword like her, but he denied it. He added that Sage is a true master of magic, especially in offensive spells. His talent is simply off the charts. With a sparkle in her eyes, she asked what the chances were that 2 unique professions could work together. He enthusiastically explained that both their crafts are unique talents needed for the entire country. He suggested immediately rushing back to the guild and delivering this important news, then gently patted Sylph on the head and praised her for the invaluable help. In the guild house, Yukina was still desperately searching for the lost guild card and wondered if she would ever find it. She also inquired about the fee for reissuing, and the receptionist informed her that it was a hefty 10,000 jewels. When the stress was clearly overwhelming her, Eris's team appeared with reassuring news and told her that they had picked up her guild card on the way. Yukina was wildly happy to see her lost guild card. She also asked if her wallet was there too. Unfortunately, Oria replied that for now they only had the guild card. She said that her wallet was snatched, and the thief just threw the cards away. When she returned it with great relief, she gladly said that she wanted to somehow repay him for his help, but Harris smiled and reassured her, "Don't worry." But she sharply cut in that there was no chance of that he could be taken somewhere else, and they could seriously abuse him. Harris felt that there really were shady dealers illegally trading guild cards, and that the risk here was much higher than he initially imagined. Then she boldly declared that she had no cash on her at all, and she would gladly repay him with her body. This remark completely confused and stunned Eris. Hearing this, Cilia naively asked what she meant, but Eris stammered and could not explain anything to her. He felt that Celia was still a bit too young to understand such delicate matters, so he turned back to Yukina. He anxiously advised her to be a little more careful and watchful around before saying such words. But she simply sincerely exclaimed that she would gladly perform for him as soon as the opportunity arose. Moreover, finally she said with unwavering sincerity that she too would gladly repay him for his kindness. But he began to stammer and could not say a proper sentence in front of her. Her face fell, and she whispered to herself that it seemed they considered her a burden one unlikely to help in battle. But Oris was truly surprised by her word, but explained it meant exactly what it sounded like, and resolutely assured them that she was ready to give her heart and soul to help with any request. And at that very moment Eris froze, embarrassed, finally understanding the innocent meaning of her careless words. He sighed with relief, and shyly said that he was extremely glad to accept her offer of help, and Yukina asked in surprise what suddenly confused him so much. And then Yukina suddenly remembered what had happened earlier. She blurted out a reckless phrase and felt her face burning with shame, completely unable to look him in the eyes, and she could hardly believe that those words had just slipped out of her mouth in front of a complete stranger. She sincerely admitted her fault and confessed that she really should have been more careful with her words, and Eris gently advised her not to dwell on it. Very much, and Silly had no idea about this awkward situation and remained carefree. She warmly invited Yukina to join them with joy and enthusiasm, eager to dive into exciting adventures together. And all three instantly introduced themselves to each other. Eris then remarked that he could not wait to see Yukina's skills in action, and she, in response with the same enthusiasm, wanted to test his abilities. Eris announced that he would take control of the designated testing ground, and the receptionist gladly offered to accompany them to the training site. At the testing field, when Yukina enthusiastically spoke about showing her formidable magical power, Eris could not help but notice that she looked very confident. Skillfully preparing to cast a spell, she swiftly activated her offensive magic flame beam and hurled a lightning-fast beam that completely burned the straw scarecrow to ashes. Cilia was quite impressed by the demonstration of her power, and Eurus enthusiastically praised her absolutely flawless fire strength. Moreover, having fully inspected the testing site, recently Yukina asked herself if this exam site had always been so broken and neglected, but she had no idea that the reason for this was right next to her. Then the receptionist told her everything that happened that day when Oris took the exam. In addition, she handed Oris 300,000 gemstones, a reward for completing the quest, and for bringing only 10 golems. The amount would be split between the heiress and Celia, each would receive 150,000, and Yukina simply froze in amazement when she heard about such money. And Celia modestly noted that none of those achievements were hers. And as if that wasn't enough, Eris earned 70 guild points and even rose to D-level adventurer. Yukina simply froze when she heard that it took him only 2 quests to rise from E rank to D rank, and just then her stomach loudly growled. Pushing Eris to suggest going to the cafeteria and having lunch before moving on, he was surprised to hear her reply with a sad expression she had no money at all. He hadn't eaten anything since the previous day, and this revelation truly shocked him. With a determined look, Celia firmly grabbed her hand and said that she couldn't fight on an empty stomach, insisting that she would treat her to lunch. Soon they found themselves in a noisy cafeteria, and Yukina devoured every dish placed before her as if she hadn't eaten for an eternity, while Oris watched her incredible appetite. With a smiling face, Yukina praised the delicious dish and generously expressed sincere gratitude to both. In turn, Silly enthusiastically admired her incredible appetite. This made Eris wonder how she had the audacity to say that right to her face. It seems Celia and Yukina simply get along wonderfully. Eurus could not understand. Despite the strange job, Yukina looked like a completely ordinary girl, so he began to question her, thinking that she must have received offers to join groups from all sides. She was respected as wise. He asked which team she was currently in, but she replied that she was traveling alone and simply could not fit into the group she was in before. She just said that they had different visions of the future, and he thought that was a fairly common reason for parting ways. Silly asked if there was a deeper reason behind this in Yukinahi. She was so particular about her future. She admitted that she set out on a journey around the world to find 7 scattered volumes of magic. Eris persistently sought confirmation. Does the legendary tome really exist that allows one to master various spells just by reading it? But she replied that only those truly worthy would be able to do so. Eris noted that it was indeed a treasure that only the wise could truly master. She also said that Kay is a renowned magic scholar, and showing a neatly and precisely written collection of notes, said that these were his personal research records containing important clues to his spell books. When Eris asked who it was about, she quietly confessed it was her father who died when she was still a child. She resolutely swore, as long as she lived, she would definitely gather everything, and this made Celia ask why she was going to such extremes. The reason was simple. Her mother, who had devotedly cared for her all this time, had recently died. And when Yukina, confused by sadness and unexpected lightness, came across her father's forgotten research. Now Eris understood why she had so passionately collected these books of spells, and also reflected that all this time she had been carrying a considerable emotional burden. Yukina also sincerely confessed to him that, having gathered all 7 volumes, she sought to unlock the magic of resurrection. Embarrassed and confused, he asked if she really wanted to resurrect her parents, and she admitted that this was part of her motivation. Most of all, she feared losing someone dear to her again. Risk called her a good soul, and she modestly considered herself rather a coward. Eris understood very well that agonizing pain of losing someone dear, and he was sure that in her place he would have done the same. But surprisingly, Yukina was connected not only by the death of her parents. Her sincere desire to master the magic of resurrection spoke volumes about her compassionate heart. She was truly a brave girl, one who proudly bore the honorable title of a wise woman. The longer Eris pondered her unwavering determination, the more he wished she were by his side. He believed that if she could unlock her immense talent, she would become an invaluable ally to them. She was absolutely essential to his dream to defeat the Demon King. And with a bunch of important thoughts swirling in his head, he asked if she wanted to officially join their team. He offered her to join his squad, assuring that together they could overthrow the Demon King and at the same time fulfill her dream to travel the world in search of ancient artifacts. Collecting magical tones around the world perfectly matched Yukina's aspirations, so he thought it was a good idea. Although she admitted it was a good offer, she politely declined his proposal. When asked why she refused, she firmly stated that she was simply not made for hero squads. She preferred to go alone rather than play as part of a group. Eris politely agreed and said that forming a party is not always just sunshine and rainbows. She exclaimed that with every encounter with formidable monsters, there is a great chance they will part forever, a hint at the possible loss of a comrade, and this was about none other than the formidable Demon Lord. This only further strengthened her resolve. Over the last 1,000 years, countless squads have boldly challenged the forces of the Demon Lord, but each time their attempts ended in ruins. Feeling this, Aura searched for the real reason and asked herself if she was truly afraid of losing her dear allies, and without hesitation answered, yes. Moreover, she said that although she believed Ori's squad would not die so easily, a deep anxiety would not leave her mind. He, however, admitted that a novice would hardly withstand an open fight with the Demon King. He decisively said that he would prove they did not take any reckless risks. Sylvia intervened and promised that she would do her best to impress Yukina and convince her to join their team. Eris even suggested that Yukina go with them, let her see how they handle the task, and then she could respond to them more decisively. Starting all over again, they could finally take on the D-rank quest. The jump from E-rank opened a completely different world both in complexity and status. One member of D-rank carried the strength of 10 from. However, Silly still doubted whether they were really ready to take on that quest. It was a higher sublevel of D-rank, and their formidable task was to exterminate 30 salamanders. Fierce lizard-like monsters living on the plains, with strong jaws and powerful paws. Even an ordinary adventurer was no match for them in a pack. But Eris confidently said that they could not just waste their valuable time and strength on weak monsters if they truly wanted to show their combined power. It was then that Oros heard in his head the echo of Sylph's voice. She asks if she can leave that realm, and at the same time reveals herself. Yukina almost froze with surprise when she saw that exquisite child. Sylph noticed that the street air always refreshes and invigorates, and then greeted Yukina. This made Celia remark that even hiding in the realm of spirits, she can still keep everything under control. Interested in the newcomer, Sylph playfully twirled around Yukina, and Yukina asked who this child was. Eris introduced herself as a spirit, asking Yukina to be gentle with Sylph because she had gone through hard times. Although Eris hesitated at first to show Sylph before Yukina. He knew well hiding her forever would not work if he truly intended to recruit Yukina into his team. The scene smoothly shifted to the Bergen Forest, near the plains, where Eris calmly suggested Celia be the first to finish off the enemy, and Celia froze at this unexpected command. It worked. She rushed to him and hugged him tightly, desperately trying to oppose his decision, and this made Eris blush slightly. He knew she could handle it herself, but he couldn't calm down. She was so nervous that she might not show all her best skills, and Yukina quietly whispered to herself, watching their behavior, "Aren't they a couple?" Still blushing, Eris gently assured Celia that they are a team, and he would definitely come to her aid if she ever found herself in danger. As soon as Sylvia heard his reassuring words, she instantly came to life and immediately agreed to carry out his order. Soon Celia bravely stood before the threatening monster, tense and ready to strike. Striking, and just as the monster felt her presence, she lunged at the beast without any hesitation. The enemy dodged slightly faster than those encountered in E-rank quests, so in a simple speed contest, Celia was clearly at a disadvantage. But as a sword saint, she had lightning-fast reflexes and sharp instincts. And in hand-to-hand combat, predicting every move of the opponent was the true key to victory. Her lightning reflexes allowed her to dodge the monster's attacks at the last moment as they charged at her with furious speed. She swiftly dealt with them using light, precise strikes, and Celia finally threw the monstrous salamander away. Oris praised her incredible skills, and Yukina simply fell silent upon seeing such formidable power. He turned to Yukina and asked if she was surprised and still shaken. She inquired how insanely difficult the training must be to reach such a level of mastery. To her surprise, he admitted that Celia had started special training only a few days ago and still had room to grow. Yukina was stunned, and then it was time for Eris to show his honed skills and incredible abilities. He explained that their team acted as one whole. Before the fight, they always carefully planned a strategic plan, and while Celia dealt with enemies with her sword, he swiftly destroyed monsters with his magic. In his assessment, their formidable group together was at the level of C-rank adventurers. This meant they could confidently demonstrate their skills against C-rank or even higher challenges, but in the middle of his passionate story about the formidable group, Yukina tried to intervene and say something important, but he did not even listen to her. Words sounded because his mind was completely absorbed by the unwavering determination to prove that none of their comrades would die, and by this, he directly paved the way to her deepest fear of losing dear allies. In his precisely planned first move, he cast a powerful enhancing spell on himself, and at that very moment, a weakening spell fell upon the horde of enemies. And he intended to release Hellfire, a terrible, destructive form that would cause the fireballs to fiercely collide and explode with incredible force. Such a fusion spell would usually consume a colossal amount of magical energy that even very skilled mages could rarely produce together. However, thanks to his unique enchantment magic, he skillfully altered the very nature of the spell, so he could unleash its full power on his own. Eris was so captivated by the display of his immense power before Yukina that he did not notice a single word she said. He openly said that they would not come out completely unscathed either, but wisely crafted a shield to protect them from any treacherous danger while carefully executing his plan. The gigantic explosion, growing ever stronger, rolled across the entire area and instantly destroyed all the monsters. However, when the dust from the explosion settled, Eris looked back to check on Yukina. He suddenly noticed that she had fainted and fallen to the ground. Soon, when Yukina regained consciousness, Eris asked with disbelief if she had really witnessed his powers in action. He admitted that he had exaggerated a little, just to prove to her how formidable his power was. Meanwhile, she acknowledged that Celia was strong, but said that Eris was on a completely different level. However, she was convinced that she did not belong in their company and that she would only drag everyone down, but Celia intervened without hesitation. She admitted that when she first met Eris, she also felt like a burden, but Yukina replied that Celia's previous team experience and her rigorous training were very important. But she froze in surprise when Eris said that Celia had also been an independent traveler before she met him. He added that he had a knack for noticing people with real potential, so he asked Yukina to at least somewhat trust his judgment because it seemed he had already managed to convince her. He suggested that she try to handle the salamander herself, and Yukina agreed almost without protest. And she created a glowing magical sphere in her palm. She released a powerful beam toward the monster. But one shot was not enough, so she quickly fired another beam and finally destroyed the creature. Watching as she revealed her magical powers, he said that both quality and quantity were excellent. She had a genuine, raw talent, but there was still room to grow. He explained in detail that usually, mastering magic requires relentless training and even though hard-earned intuition and experience were undoubtedly important, there was also a clever trick hidden here. He then used the same magical powers and techniques as she did, and released a much more powerful explosion that easily took down several salamanders in one strike. Then he took out the fearsome claws of the fallen monsters as proof of the hunt, and explained that he left the initial magical power at the same level as hers, just adding a few sophisticated techniques. Yukina froze with her jaw, dropped in uncontrollable amazement, when a magical power 3 times stronger than her own appeared before her. Step by step, he explained the technique so she would understand everything completely. He started with fire beams and explained that all advanced magic is a combination of simple spells, but during this binding, unfortunately, a large part of the magical power is lost. So if they manage to strengthen this connection, they will easily get rid of the waste. She instantly understood his explanation and added that almost 70 of the initial power is lost during transformation. But Eris was sure she would withstand all this magic, and almost tripled her power. But she considered these only theoretical assumptions and doubted whether it would really work in practice. He answered her directly. She could simply use binding magic to make the spells merge seamlessly. She was not satisfied and asked further if he intended to activate this additionally and whether it would increase magic consumption. However, he denied it and with a light flick of his finger summoned a tiny spark of fire, saying that this does not create fire or water from nothing, it only takes a particle of magic needed for ignition. But when she inquired about the exact combination of binding magic, she was completely shocked. He simply said that he considered it ordinary magic. He added that in his previous group, everyone expected that buffs from several people would stack on each other, as if it were a completely normal thing. He then magically intervened himself and reminded the embarrassed women that it was like reversing the script of magical common sense. Suddenly grabbing a stick, he sketched a rough silhouette of a person on the ground, drawing an intricate magical pattern inside, and explained that this magical chain could be imagined as a binary system. 1 when it is active, 0 when it is not. He continued, all magic is just precise combinations of zeros and ones. And as the number of branches grew, they could easily turn on and off individual segments. Finally, the complex idea came together for her, and she said that magic would theoretically have 48,816 combinations if the branch was increased. But her face twisted with realization. With just 10 branches, there were already over 1,000 combinations, and with only 20 over a million, as if all magic could be explained by these intricacies. A spark of determination lit up in her eyes, and she rapidly flipped through the pages of the book. Then she rushed to try all the magical spells, using the newly understood idea of double combinations of zeros and ones. Her face shone with excitement. She realized that now she could master countless applications, and that the possibilities were almost endless, and her sincere enthusiasm reminded Eris that she was truly the brilliant daughter of a scientist. Then, to be sure, she asked if it was really no longer necessary to collect spellbooks for resurrection magic. But Harris gently declined and said that what he had deciphered was only a drop in the ocean of how magic really works. Especially in ancient magic, there were still mysteries he could not fully explain, so he decided to show the power of the magic of connections. Magic, he carefully wrote combinations of zeros and ones on the ground, and advised her to first try this exact order. Yukina obeyed, cast 2 simple spells, and flawlessly applied communication magic, connecting them exactly as she was taught. Then she unleashed a barrage of huge, fierce fireballs. She created a massive explosion that she had never been able to achieve before. Pure admiration shone on her face when she saw that she was controlling her true powers. Shortly after, she cleared the entire area inhabited by formidable monsters. They were returning when Eris sincerely thanked Yukina for her much-needed help. However, she modestly said that she owed him one, as she herself would have taken twice as long to do the same. She, hesitating a little, asked if she could officially join their party, and their faces instantly lit up with happiness. Silly hugged her tightly and joyfully. She, pleased with herself, remarked that now she had a new mom. Eris warmly welcomed her at their party, and Yukina promised to do everything possible to help with this party. At the guild house, the receptionist was genuinely surprised. Yukina, who had always been so extremely reluctant to join parties, finally joined one, and meanwhile Celia enthusiastically said that Eris really knows how to attract people. Moreover, the receptionist examined the claws they brought as proof of the hunt, and although it was quite enough, it didn't impress her much. However, Yukina admitted that the magic she taught her was simply astonishingly powerful, so much so that she accidentally destroyed the saw. What remained of those terrible salamanders? The receptionist praised Eris, saying she was truly unparalleled in teaching, and then, as if in passing, added that both Celia and Yukina simply have a lot of talent. This allowed them to learn much faster. He believed that a narrow perspective could not truly reveal their full talent. Focusing only on what was right under their noses, they would not see the distant moon, but if you remove the self-imposed frames of attention, you can even clearly see the fairway moon. Yukina considered this analogy simply stunning. She also asked if they had already chosen a name for the party, and he replied that they still hadn't found a suitable name and was keeping it in mind. After long deliberations, Eris, without wasting time, instantly registered the name of their party, Infinity. And finally, after a long wait, they enjoyed the much-needed food. Eris inquired about her housing, and Yukina sighed and said that that morning she had no money to continue her stay. The morning was just beginning, but Celia, without hesitation, immediately offered that she temporarily stay in their room. Hearing this, Yukina explained and asked if they would really be in the same room. She looked at him with a clearly inquisitive expression, and he, stammering, said it was only because of silly and strong persistence. But Yukina did agree to stay. Iris thought to himself, they definitely need to move to a bigger end soon. At that moment, suspicious figures in hoods suddenly approached them and said that Yukina had supposedly lost her guild card. But when she looked inside, she immediately realized it was not hers at all. To their astonishment, the figures swiftly grabbed Celia, holding her hostage with a knife pressed firmly to her neck. One of the threatening men sternly ordered Eris to raise his hands and come quietly. Eris asked why they had suddenly appeared, and Yukina said that those thugs were probably black market guild card traders, and when one of them sensed she had hit the mark, he admitted she was very observant. She casually noted that it was obvious only someone using another's guild card would get involved in such shady dealings. Eris instantly remembered that boy from earlier, and wondered if they had come to avenge their fallen comrade, but the hooligan replied that Eris was not very clever in this matter. He said coldly, the boy was just a pawn to be used and discarded, and what happened to him was none of his business. He shouted aggressively that Eris's report had gotten them into deep trouble, and Eris, without blinking, assured that they were ready for the consequences of conducting dark business in the capital. This only further fueled the hooligan's rage when he said he could simply sell that rust to two pretty ladies to cover their losses. They said that Eris would surely regret making them his enemies, but Eris calmly said that the mistake was theirs. At that moment, Ocilia grabs her sword, and Yukina feels her magical power returning. They quickly subdued those hooligans, almost without resistance. Their bewildered leader froze in admiration, seeing the lightning-fast reflexes of these women, but Eris sneaked up and cunningly grabbed him from behind. He said that Cilia and Yukina were simply too strong for his men. Tightly binding all three of them with a rope, he ordered Cilia to call the royal guard. Meanwhile, the leader hastily offered Eris more money than the guild paid if he went with them. But Horus simply admitted that he had received nothing at all from the guild for his actions. In fact, Eris preferred a peaceful society where there was no illegal black market trade. And he even said directly, I work for my principles and my own benefit, not just for money. As soon as they entered the inn courtyard, Celia, with indignation in her voice, asked why Eris did not help her when the bandit took her hostage. Oris replied that he thought she could handle them herself, without anyone's help. For example, her face was still pouting, slyly diverting the conversation aside. Oris announced that the distribution of the reward needed to be discussed. In response, Yukina assured that the contribution criteria were confusing, and that usually they distributed the reward depending on who did how much. Harris thought to himself, although the damage inflicted often favors the attackers, in his opinion the support role should also receive a decent reward. To keep everything fair, Eris announced that he would allocate 10 for party expenses and split the rest equally among themselves. However, Yukina immediately objected to his decision, insisting that it would be completely unfair to him after all. He had unquestionably done more in battle. Even with that decision, it was more than he had received in the days when he was on the hero's team. And Eris simply replied that in the end, everything would even out if they both became equally stronger. Inspired by his words, the two women felt a surge of enthusiasm and decided to work hard together. Moreover, Oris suggested that as members of the squad, they should pay together for lodging and consider moving to a new, larger inn. At that moment, Yukina instantly pointed to the crib and hurriedly asked if Eris and Cilia really slept together in the same crib, and Cilia confirmed without hesitation. She also said that he often clung to her so tightly while sleeping that it was hard for her to break free, and she was still shocked that he really did that while she was resting. Meanwhile, Yukina comfortably settled on the velvet couch and admitted that she hadn't felt such a lively night and energetic day in a long time. Eris gently stroked her head but immediately felt a piercing gaze directed at him, and meeting eyes with Celia, he lost his words, not knowing how to justify his action. Jealous of Yukina, she flopped onto the bed and suddenly asked him to stroke her the same way, and he froze in surprise. Having no other choice, he nestled between them and immediately felt their soft bodies press against him. He blushed deeply from embarrassment. The next morning, Yukina greeted him and, looking at his face, said that it seemed he had slept little that night. Night and only Eris knew the truth why he could not rest peacefully. Soon they reached the dining hall, where a huge crowd had gathered near the gates. A note was stuck on the door saying the dining hall was closed due to a critical shortage of ingredients. As soon as Eris stepped inside, he immediately felt a disgusting stench that filled everything around. They went further and discovered that the entire stock of ingredients had spoiled, and the chef said that all the food had gone bad overnight. Seeing the rotten food, Yukina instantly understood. The spoilage was caused by a violation of magic. The natural magic flowing through the earth sometimes went out of control, and there was a high probability that it would accidentally turn into decay magic. When Eris was still inspecting the pantry, he simply could not believe it. The entire stock had spoiled overnight. To everyone's surprise, Orst picked up a rotten apple and tried to bite it, and Celia was simply bewildered, but Yukina with her sharp gaze advised her to look more closely. And to her surprise, the rotten apple miraculously turned into a fresh one. Eris realized that he could effectively use his restoration spell to return the food to the state of the previous night, when it was not yet spoiled, and with one smooth wave the entire rotting area instantly restored to its former glory. The sad expression on the chef's face instantly turned into genuine joy. He expressed deep gratitude, and asking how he could repay him, heard a simple answer from Eris: truly delicious food would be the best reward for their efforts. But Eris had spent so much life energy that he noticeably staggered and barely stood on his feet, so Celia and Yukina immediately caught him. Yukina claimed that his magical reserves were undoubtedly exhausted after such a powerful spell, and advised to eat well and rest properly to get back on his feet as soon as possible. Seeing the urgent need, the cook immediately ordered his colleagues to rush to his aid and prepare restorative dishes without delay. After some time, they comfortably settled at the dining table, and Yukina, with a note of surprise, remarked that even Eris could exhaust magic, to which he modestly replied that he was human too, just like them. Moreover, he fervently asked the chef not to tell anyone about his miraculous revival of the ingredients, but the chef replied that this was an incredible opportunity for him to become famous worldwide. Meanwhile, Celia proudly stated that it was precisely his modesty that made him so incredibly cool. In response, Oris explained that if this widespread magical disturbance really covered the entire area, then it was probably in a terrible state, and it was completely impossible for him to revive everything from all sides alone. So the cook also agreed to keep it a secret. When everyone finally left the dining room, Yukina, not believing her eyes, said she could not believe that all the ingredients had spoiled at the same time. And they also frankly admitted that the magical disturbance deeply worried them. They said that the magical fury of the earth was only a harbinger of a large-scale magical catastrophe, and most likely it would have severe consequences. They headed to the guild house, and surprisingly, the entire guild had already gathered before them. The receptionist, beaming with joy, announced that Eurus had miraculously and effortlessly revived the spoiled ingredients, and that clear traces of magical magic had been detected. Eris stood stunned and could not believe his eyes. Everyone suddenly learned about his specialized enchantment magic. However, one of them said that he had heard rumors a new sorcerer would join the team of heroes. And Eris instantly grabbed this timely distraction, proclaiming that man a true magician and avoiding trouble for a while. He quickly returned to his squadmates and suggested immediately looking for new requests. Moreover, he was overwhelmed with relief. Someone had already taken his place in the party of heroes, and now he could finally get rid of constantly following his former party comrades. As soon as they entered, they were immediately struck there were strangely few applications on the wall, and they aloud wondered if this was really the result of the recent magical disturbance. Although his heiress tried to return the form, everyone suddenly heard aloud. From outside came a loud, ominous strike, and they were left completely stunned. Eris immediately rushed to check the commotion, but the dense crowd did not allow anything to be seen. They decided to go upstairs and observe from above, and he was filled with complete horror. He came across a newly built dungeon for gorillas, above which hung a sinister timer. Terrible consequence: if the magical barrier falls in just 3 hours, monsters will flood the entire village. Eris, with a sad expression, said that this was the same type of dungeon that tragically appeared in his hometown 6 years ago. Although then the hero and reinforcements from the capital eventually suppressed it, this happened only after the entire village was completely destroyed. This time Eris decided to prioritize saving every living creature. He truly wanted to value each life, so he instantly devised a plan to lead everyone to the neighboring village within the critical 3 hours. When Celia and Yukina began to retreat, he activated his detection magic that enveloped everything around, and gave everyone faster legs. Immediately after that, a sudden lightness overwhelmed the group, filling them with energy and making them run much faster. Stunned, Yukina asked if he really gave such a powerful spell to everyone, and Eris just smiled and replied that such a level of magical load was no problem for him. 6 years ago, he firmly decided, if such a tragedy happens again, he will not allow it no matter the cost. And at that moment, the receptionist appeared and warned them about the sudden appearance of a dungeon, asking to immediately send a hunting squad, although it was clear to everyone that Eris's squad would go. He admitted that they did not want to be just a hunting squad, they aimed to act as an advanced team, and shocked by his audacious proposal, she asked if he really wanted to act alone, warning him not to be too reckless even with great power. He explained that these particular monsters do not act in groups, they move individually, so they would have to deal with each separately, and concluded that a small elite team is much more effective than just gathering a large ordinary group of hunters. He added that he was not really alone, implying that his dear comrades Celia and Yukina would have his back. The receptionist anxiously asked them to take care of themselves, and Oris ordered his people to quickly get all the necessary potions. Before rushing further into the crowd to offer help, to his surprise, suddenly his former comrades appeared, and Nardo informed them that the civilians would follow their example, but Yukina sharply intervened and exclaimed that there was no such rule and they had not yet received any concrete orders from the capital. But Nardo, with a haughty expression, declared that they were the ones in command here. Irritated by his audacious remark, Oris called him incredible for still holding himself so high, and added that in fact they had been at the forefront. Nardo exploded in response, sharply asking if they wanted to selfishly take all the credit for themselves. He also resolutely stated that he would immediately head to the dungeon if that was really the case. Other members wisely calmed Nardo down. There was no need to rush, we still had no supplies nearby. Despite everything, Nardo decisively ordered his comrades to go forward and enter the dungeon. As they were leaving, Yukina said that for the heroic party it should be a real shame to lag behind in conquering the dungeon, and Eurus could not help but feel sincere pity for the new blessing mage, who would now have to support them. Meanwhile, deep in the dungeon, while the hero squad was engaged in a fierce, chaotic battle with terrible monsters, Nardo howled in despair. His voice grew because the damage they were suffering was as if they were completely defenseless. He fiercely demanded to know what was happening, to which the new mage replied that he was giving all his strength and that the magical enhancement within him was fully active, but Nardo involuntarily exclaimed that Eurus had always done much more than he was managing now. Another comrade intervened, wisely advising Nardo not to argue with his ally, and sternly warned that if he carelessly let down his guard, he would inevitably get injured. Overcome with shared despair for her, the team used their various skills and magical abilities to defeat the monsters inside, fighting recklessly. Nardo cornered a terrible creature and immediately ordered Cryone to unleash her powerful attacking magic. But she was already busy healing another wounded comrade with her precious healing magic. The creature sharply swung its massive tail, and Nardo was wildly thrown to the ground. Meanwhile, Crenid, noticeably tense, admitted that they had no magical power left at all. The new member asked if they even had an antidote, because basilisk poison is a deadly toxin that mercilessly counts down the seconds. Completely unsuspecting, Nardo carelessly allowed the disguised monster saliva, dripping right in front of him, to fall on his bare arm, and this caused a strong reaction. The arm instantly swelled. He desperately begged for someone to give him an antidote potion, but Cryone anxiously said that they no longer had any healing potions left, and wisely suggested to immediately get out of the dungeon. And the new mage admitted, if he had known about such serious consequences, he would have brought more supplies. Soon the Ares squad confidently entered the dungeon, and Yukina quietly hoped that the party of heroes would not start complaining upon seeing them. Eris replied that they should not allow themselves the luxury of complaining. At that moment, a terrifying roar echoed through the dungeon, instantly alerting everyone present. When they moved further, they saw that the heroes were in even worse condition than before, and noticed the terrifying basilisk. Oris admitted that they should have arrived a little earlier. Activating his magic circle, Oris instantly fired a fiery piercing shot, and sent a blazing beam that rushed towards the creature and left it completely motionless. Celia and Yukina again enthusiastically praised his incredible skill, while his former partners simply froze in amazement upon seeing this. Cryone called him dishonest. He secretly left the party, and now boasts such incredible offensive magic. In response, he calmly spoke the same harsh words that Nardo had addressed to him, declaring that everything was already decided without the right to explanation. Dismissal was inevitable. He also admitted that the Pearson's fire shot was an advanced application of blessing magic, which he tried for the first time precisely after his exile. And he took out a vital healing potion from the inventory slot and said that this was exactly what they desperately needed at that critical moment. Nardo's face lit up with unspeakable joy upon seeing the antidote. Celia wondered whether Urias had foreseen this situation in advance and prepared those most necessary potions. Oris simply explained that the partisan dungeon was an extremely isolated place where magic disappeared incredibly fast, and most monsters were aggressively elemental. Additionally, if the potions were insufficient, deadly poison or paralysis could affect them, and ordinary healing barely helped. They remained dangerously immobile. With a firm expression, he admitted that he too had entered this dungeon for the first time, and the local environment and fighting style of its inhabitants were completely new to him, and also pushed them to act prudently in everything they did. Then he motioned with his hand for them to move forward and clearly indicated the direction of the portal leading to the exit. To his great surprise, Nardo addressed him directly. His voice strangely became sincere as he insisted that he truly counted on him. Harris could not even imagine that the day would come when he would hear such words from Nardo, and thought that Nardo seemed to have finally met harsh reality. That was why he was so unexpectedly honest. In a resolute tone, Eris assured him, leave everything under his care. Meanwhile, as they walked, Celia asked with burning curiosity whether Eurus had already predicted the exact features and types of monsters in that dungeon, and Eurus himself apologized to both of them for dragging them into such a dangerous situation. He was deeply troubled that the once world-famous team of heroes was now in such a state. Yukina grumbled that they were so obsessed with appearances that they couldn't even protect their partners. But Eris calmly replied that these were still his usual places. When she heard this, Yukina blinked in surprise. She realized that he was really from the same group of heroes, and Eurus suddenly realized that he had never told her about this before. He immediately sincerely apologized to Yukina if his past had somehow made her feel uncomfortable. She calmly replied that she even felt relieved he was just as much a stranger as she was, and she loved him just as he was, not only because he was a hero. Eris's face noticeably flushed from her words, and the speaker also blushed, hastily clarifying that she meant it as a person. At that very moment, Cilia suddenly appeared between them, causing both to jump and be surprised. He pointed forward, saying that there were many doors where they were heading. Walking through those numerous doors, Cilia asked if they could just hurriedly open any of them, and Oris assured her. At the same time, he activated the zone scanning skill, and it instantly detected a swarm of dangerous monsters hiding behind those doors. Yukina thought that if they opened all the doors and listened to foolish advice, they definitely wouldn't make it in time, so for now they just moved forward. They went a little further and came across majestic doors, studded with several keyholes. It seemed to them that the dungeon boss was hiding even deeper behind this formidable obstacle, and to open the doors, they would need many keys. Seeing so many lock openings, it became clear. The keys were cleverly hidden behind those doors, one behind each. Cilia decisively said there was no other way they would have to defeat the monsters inside each gate, but as soon as they moved forward, Haris hurriedly stopped them. He accidentally pulled Yukina's belt. She blushed and immediately warned him not to grab her in such a place. Since they needed to collect only 20 keys, Oris explained that they didn't have time for such a long process. The process was complicated, and the simple method just didn't work. It was even funny to ask if there was some hidden way to open those doors. But Eris showed that everything turned out to be much simpler than they had imagined. Forming a powerful magical circle, he unleashed a huge explosion of fire directly at the massive doors, and they instantly shattered from the sheer force. Celia and Yukina froze in complete astonishment. They never expected him to resort to such brute force. When the doors opened, a frightening, formidable dragon appeared before them. Wasting no time, Aristocler immediately drew Dragon's attention to himself, quickly ordering Celia to attack from behind, and Yukina to skillfully cover them from the rear. Dragon's huge maw opened wide, and a fierce blast of fire burst forth, engulfing everything around. Eris swiftly appeared behind him and fired an accurate shot that pierced the flames. Indeed, a formidable beast, but its incredibly tough scales did not have a single scratch. As ordered, Celia stepped out from behind, and precisely struck the monster with her sturdy sword. When Eris praised her skill, the dragon cunningly took advantage of the moment and grabbed her while she was distracted. Overcome with panic, Eris quickly prepared for another desperate strike, but Yukina sharply shouted to Celia to dodge. Simultaneously unleashing her powerful attacking magic towards Dragon was Celia saved, and was Drayden lay injured. When the beast paused for a moment on the ground, Eris took the chance, rushed forward, and struck a precise, powerful blow. The mighty Dragon was finally defeated. Their victory was announced throughout the region. They stood outside, breathing a sigh of relief. Finally cleared the dungeon. Meanwhile, Eris simultaneously cast her calming restorative spell on them. Yukina proudly declared that this was undoubtedly the fastest record in history. Eris had completed such a difficult dungeon so quickly. But he smiled warmly and said that he definitely did not do it alone. The three of them overcame it together, coordinated like one team. He admitted that if it weren't for Cilia's precise strike on the seams of Dragon's scales, he would never have noticed its weak spot. And if it weren't for Yukina's timely help, Cilia confessed that she would have been torn to pieces. Stammering, Yukina modestly said that she did nothing special, just attacked from behind, but Eurus still praised her for the very necessary help, and her cheeks reddened with embarrassment. He emphasized once again that in the dungeon, where magic spread wildly, there were almost no adventurers left who could effectively strike with magic from such a distance. He gently took her hand and offered a magical restorative spell, and she shyly expressed sincere gratitude. Jealous of their closeness, Celia hurriedly squeezed between them, clung tightly to Eris, and dramatically shouted that she was in pain and desperately needed his immediate help. Meanwhile, Yukina couldn't hold back and giggled at the lively energy of their bright party. She quietly spoke to her deceased parents and thought to herself that it would really be easy for her to get along with these people, and just then, from somewhere, it suddenly appeared by itself, and she gently thanked both her mothers, Cilia and Yukina, for allowing her to go outside, because it seemed everyone had already been successfully evacuated from the village. She slyly thought that she could finally steal whatever she wanted, but Celia instantly scolded her for such thoughts. Haris could not help but think, What egocentric and dangerous thoughts for a person who looked like an innocent child. Seeing them so close, she jokingly, a little self-satisfiedly remarked that Eurus had successfully stolen the hearts of her mothers, but he, with a blush on his cheeks, explained that their closeness was simply an effective way to restore magical powers. She sternly added to him that if it was still okay for Celia, then for Yukina it was extremely rude. Although her face was burning red like a beet, Eris tried to convince herself that it was just fatigue from magic exhaustion. Just then Yukina sharply turned around and assured him that she was fine now, and Eurus told Solf that there really was a distance between him and Yukina. Celia called him hopelessly inattentive. He thought to himself that the union with Yukina was only for their common goals. That day, having overcome the notorious partisan lair, they took another decisive step toward their great goal to return peace to the world. He thought that together with Celia and Yukina, he must grow and grow to finally defeat the formidable Demon King. Instead, the royal guards quietly whispered in the corner of the village, unable to understand whether the squad of heroes should have already retreated, while some insisted on immediately reporting everything to the palace. Then the scene smoothly shifted to the royal palace of the Male Kingdom, where the respected King Floyd proposed to choose a new hero ideal truly unique for their country. The minister sharply responded that even if they were heroes of the Alliance, finding adventures that surpass them is a huge challenge. Floyd confidently stated that it has already been proven such extraordinary people really exist. 3 days after the Eurus group defeated the dangerous partisan dungeon, they set off to the noisy market, where the shop owner immediately recognized them as true heroes who successfully overcame the recent crisis. She leaned closer and asked if Eris was really that former hero and whether he should have kept it a secret. Eris realized that almost everyone had already guessed about his past. Celia asked for 4 loaves of bread, and as soon as the shop owner saw her, she was clearly captivated and immediately called her a beauty. Someone jokingly asked if she was Ares's girl, and Ares was clearly embarrassed by this, but Celia calmly refused and proudly declared that she was the sword saint of the group. When Letty heard this, she generously gave her the whole bag of bread instead of just 4, and Celia's face instantly lit up with joy. Another seller picked up the conversation, assuring that the village miraculously came to life thanks to their heroism, and even the fruit seemed much juicier. Yukina, as always learned, explained that the closure of the dungeon significantly stabilized the local flow of magic, and the seller enthusiastically praised her vast knowledge and asked who she was. Then Eris appeared proudly introduced her as wise and said that she greatly contributed to the recent success of the group. The merchant blossomed with joy upon hearing this, and he quickly gave her his juiciest fruits as a token of gratitude, and immediately the shopkeepers and sellers all over the market showered them with gifts and sincere thanks. Both Celia and Yukina seemed to genuinely enjoy the attention and praise pouring down on them, and another seller remarked. Someone pointed to Nardo's group. They were confidently strolling through the village, but when the critical moment came and help was needed, they instantly retreated, and another added that Eris's team was much more reliable. The entire market then generously and wholeheartedly thanked them for their timely and decisive assistance. Later, when they finally broke through the huge crowd, a sigh of relief was heard. And that made Yukina ask if he was not tired. He said he had never had such an experience before, so he was not yet used to such open admiration. Moreover, when they arrived at the guild house, the receptionist immediately apologized for calling so suddenly when he was supposed to be resting, but Eurus replied that he had rested enough in these 3 days and asked what was the urgent matter she called about. She admitted that she had an important letter, addressed specifically to Eris, and told him to go to the inner room. At that very moment, Eris felt a chill. His past as a former hero was now known to everyone. While the receptionist escorted them, Celia pointed out that usually no one was allowed there. But the receptionist explained that it was their private office. She informed the group that after the lightning-fast completion of the underground quest yesterday, a letter had arrived directly from the capital. And since the letter arrived with incredible speed, it was clearly a carrier pigeon, so when Eurus asked who it was from, this became extremely important to them. She confessed that the letter was from King Floyd of the Kingdom of Men, and this revelation truly stunned him. Looking at the letter, he clearly read that. The king personally congratulated them on the lightning-fast and decisive conquest of the dungeon. The letter also announced that soon the joint hero squad would be disbanded, and at the same time, a separate squad would be created solely for the Kingdom of Men. And most importantly, it was announced that the new hero team would be led by none other than Eris full-raised himself. Celia and Yukina were bursting with joy upon hearing this. They believed that their incredible feats in the dungeon were finally officially recognized. Self also appeared on the spot and, smiling, said that although she was not very knowledgeable about such matters, it sounded truly impressive. The receptionist claimed that this was quite logical, considering Eris's incredible achievements, but what was truly impressive was that she was nominated directly, personally by the staff. But Celia could not contain her surprise. Why create a completely new team if Eris could simply be taken into the existing one? In response, Yukino explained that this party was just a coalition, essentially a multinational army funded by neighboring countries. But due to the prolonged absence of major battles with the formidable Demon King, more and more countries refused to pay. And because of this, there was a catastrophic lack of money-talented travelers gathered less and less often. Additionally, everything worsened significantly since 6 years ago when a partisan dungeon appeared in Eris's hometown. Now the elements could strike anywhere, so saving people took precedence over hunting the Demon King, and the countries began to generously invest in their urgent needs. The receptionist also whispered that the United Heroes party had left after the recent retreat from the dungeon, and it seemed the king had decisively decided to create his own independent group of heroes solely to protect the kingdom. Finally, Celia seemed to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation and proudly declared that it was the time of Eris, while Eurus, hesitating slightly, called it a very positive interpretation. Moreover, he stated that his ultimate goal was still to defeat the formidable Demon King, and joining the heroes' party was only a temporary stop. Yet someone replied that the bitter memories of that old team of heroes were incredibly hard to forget. His appearance made the receptionist wary. She asked if something was bothering him, and to her surprise, Eurus inquired if there was even the slightest possibility to refuse the honorable nomination to the new team of heroes, persistently adding if it was specifically about the role of leader. But he explained that he meant becoming a hero in general, and this confession stunned everyone in the room, causing them to freeze in silence. She was still noticeably shocked and, stammering, replied that refusing a royal decree had never happened before, and Celia and Yukina desperately tried to persuade him, saying that refusing such an honor would be a huge loss, and that he still had to participate, though he was clearly hesitant. Meanwhile, Eris could not understand how to explain all his tangled feelings to everyone. Meanwhile, in the grand audience hall of the Male Kingdom, Galius Sheffield, Fura Forrest, Souls Astria, and Miguel Brau. They were solemnly appointed as the new, outstanding heroes of the Male Kingdom, and I, the king, did it personally. Then Floyd started talking about the party leader. Gallius quickly calmed him down and, with a confident smile, said that he would handle it without problems. He had led an A-rank squad for years and was quite confident in his leadership abilities. Floyd calmly said that the leader had already been decisively chosen, although he was not there at that moment. Gallius immediately apologized for the mistake in his words and immediately asked who this leader was, to which Floyd replied that it was none other than Eris Fowlers. Gallius immediately recognized him as a skilled spellcaster from the former heroes' party, and this clearly surprised him, while Floyd cheerfully added that, although it had not yet been publicly announced, he had heard that Joris had single-handedly stormed the partisan dungeon. Floyd proudly added that even after leaving the ranks of the heroes, he still resolutely sought to save people. His spirit and innate strength were truly extraordinary. Floyd considered him fully worthy of such an honorable title. Meanwhile, Gallius broke out in a cold sweat when he realized that the leader of the heroes' party had incredible power. He knew that on behalf of the king, directly from him, the leader would be endowed with stunning power and influence both inside the party and beyond its borders. Gallius could not understand why he was not chosen. Everyone recognized his skill. He had led many squads to success for years, and it was extremely humiliating for him to come to that grand stage only to work under the command of some boy named Eris. He firmly believed that if he had been the first to come across the dungeon, without a doubt he would have been chosen as the leader, not Rusa. Meanwhile, Fira asked if the team leader could change later. And Floyd replied that although he was not thinking about it now, the topic could occasionally come up in court discussions every few years. Years later, then he revealed that in a few days Eris was to arrive in the capital and officially join them, and ordered everyone to stay in Stenbei until then. Gallius increasingly thought with indignation that the king was simply using the retreat of the previous group of heroes as a convenient excuse, and now slightly overestimated Eris. He thought with resentment, if Eris simply were not nearby, the king would have no other choice but to appoint him to this position. Leaving the capital, a sinister oath ripened in his mind. He would definitely remove Eurus, although he did not yet know what he was really like.